Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of David Nixon. David Nixon was a friendly, ambitious, and optimistic man living in Grapevine, Texas. He had a talent for selling and was involved in trade. David married Donna Lela in 1990. The following year, they welcomed their son. He then ventured into real estate, which proved to be a successful field for him. Over time, he became one of the top agents in the city, handling million-dollar transactions. David's marriage ended in 1995 when he began an affair with flight attendant Lisa Hill. After the divorce, he stayed on friendly terms with his first wife, mainly because of their shared son, Nicholas. David then married another woman, but that marriage lasted only 2 years. He didn't remain single for long. Before his divorce from Lisa was finalized, he met a 27-year-old woman who initially overlooked his advances. Eventually, they decided to move into David's house together, which could signify his third marriage. David was known to his relatives for his love of fine and luxurious things, often owning more than his income could afford. 11-year-old Nicholas admired his father, believing David to be a wonderful man who was always willing to help the family. David was at the peak of his life when he suddenly became the victim of a horrific massacre. On the evening of April 18, 2002, a passing motorist discovered a fire and reported it to the fire department. After extinguishing the fire, the firefighters discovered a human body. They quickly called the police. In the middle of the night, a police investigator arrived at the scene of a fire at David Nixon's home in Grand Prairie, Texas. David had recently moved to the area. As the officer stepped out of his car onto the front driveway, he was hit by the horrible smell of burning flesh. He found a body wrapped in a partially burned sheet. Further investigation revealed it was an electric blanket, along with a sturdy camping tarp and rope that held everything together. When police examined the body, they found it was too charred to tell whether it was a man or a woman. However, they were able to determine that the deceased had fair skin based on the remaining facial features. It took several hours to carefully remove the body from the scene of the fire. During their investigation, they discovered several fibrous materials that could have been used to start the fire. These materials were later identified as electric blankets. Unfortunately, they did not find any other significant evidence to identify the suspect. A forensic expert analyzed the case and concluded that the victim was a man in his 40s who was murdered by a single gunshot to the heart before a fire broke out. There were no signs of a struggle, suggesting that the victim was caught off guard, possibly while sleeping. The initial autopsy could not identify the victim, but police believed he was the homeowner. To confirm his identity, they needed dental records and documents, which ultimately revealed that he was David Nixon, a 40-year-old. The event was a devastating loss for the deceased's family, especially for his son Nicholas. On that day, Nicholas was supposed to call his father but couldn't reach him. The Nicholas sensed that something was wrong but had no idea that his father was already dead. From the beginning, police suspected that Tracy, David's third wife, might be the killer. Friends of the couple noted that while they generally got along, they also had serious arguments, often over finances and David's gambling debts. As Tracy's tumultuous relationship with David progressed, she discovered that he was wasting money on gambling. Their arguments became more heated in the early spring of 2002. After nearly 4 years together, they decided to separate. However, a serious tax lawsuit ensued. To protect his assets and avoid losing his home, David transferred ownership of the house to Tracy. When it came time to discuss separation, Tracy insisted on keeping David's luxurious home, which had a hidden terrace and a heated pool. David tried to negotiate with her to get his property back, but she refused to agree. In April, things escalated when David reported to the police that Tracy had changed the locks on his house without his permission. She took advantage of his absence while he was away for a work-related trip to a nearby city. That evening, the police intervened to help resolve the situation. She argued that she had invested her own money in renovating the house and wanted to keep it. However, she could not provide evidence of her financial investment, and they were unable to reach an agreement. Nearly 2 weeks later, David was found murdered. This raised suspicions, especially since he had no known conflicts with anyone else, making it plausible that Tracy may have been involved in his death to retain ownership of the house. That evening, upon hearing about David's ex-husband's death, Donna went to the police station. Donna reported that David had recently expressed concerns for his safety due to Tracy's erratic behavior. She also provided the police with David's will, which he had asked her to share, naming a potential culprit if anything ever happened to him. Despite this, David had never reported any domestic violence incidents to the police and often minimized his problems. Donna understood the risks David faced during their property division, as he consistently sought to resolve conflicts peacefully. However, it seemed that Tracy was provoking new conflicts. Donna called the police to her ex-husband's home when her son could not reach his father. Donna had previously contacted Tracy to find out what might have happened, but Tracy dismissed her concerns. Tracy said she had not been keeping tabs on David, whom she had broken up with, and suggested he might be drinking or gambling. The couple had been living together in a house in Grapevine that was the subject of a dispute. They had recently agreed that the man would be moving out to a new place in Grand Prairie just a few days before his death. Tracy later confessed that they had talked about the move, and David had asked her to rent a van to help with transporting their belongings. She did not leave him in a tough spot. Instead, she called a car service and rented a special cart to load items into the van. David packed his things and went to the new address, planning to return for the rest of his belongings. However, he never came back. The disagreements that occurred created a strong motive for the crime. From the beginning, the police were interested in Tracy. They considered her a prime suspect in the case. When the police informed Tracy of the news that David had been murdered, the police expected her to be distraught and in need of comfort after the loss of a loved one. However, her reaction was unexpected. She was indifferent, uncaring, and showed no signs of distress. From that moment on, the police began to confirm their suspicions. Tracy revealed that she and David had had a serious disagreement in the months before David's death. With tears in her eyes, she shared that just before these events, she had lost her child, which made the situation worse. Last fall, Tracy discovered she was pregnant, which coincided with the decline of their relationship. In addition, she was dealing with health issues that contributed to her emotional struggles. Realizing that it was not the right time to have a child, she chose to terminate the pregnancy. Despite her decision, she still held David responsible for the loss of the child. It's important that police found no evidence of Tracy's pregnancy, as there was no documentation to support her claims. Everything was based solely on her statements. During the first interrogation, police closely observed the Tracy, and afterward, every officer was convinced that she was not telling the truth. They noted that she gave evasive answers, appeared confused in her testimony, and her body language often suggested she was lying. The woman insisted that she was not involved in the murder and was unaware of the details surrounding it. Since Tracy refused to admit anything, the police had no evidence to confront her with. Tracy was later released from custody. Extensive searches were conducted at the scene of the massacre and in the sewer. However, much of the evidence was washed away by the fire department's efforts to extinguish the fire. Key clues included tire tracks that matched the tire tracks of the truck Tracy had rented for David's move. Small fibers of fabric similar to those used to wrap the body were also found in the sewer. It appeared that the killer had attempted to dump the body in the sewer but was unsuccessful. Although most witnesses described Tracy in a negative light, this information was not enough to make an arrest or charge. Police began reviewing surveillance camera footage near David's home, That same day, they captured footage of a young woman who closely resembled Tracy near a store not far from the residence. Although the footage was limited, it helped police reconstruct the events. After reviewing dozens of hours of video, they identified a distinctive yellow truck that had stopped near the murder scene. The tire tracks from the truck matched those found at the crime scene. They then followed the truck to a nearby driveway. Additionally, 3 days after David's murder, they spotted a white Lexus, similar to Tracy's, driving in the area. The same woman was recorded walking past the store entrance. She made a purchase and left, and store employees reported that she had purchased a large amount of cleaning products, which raised suspicion. Police recognized Tracy and began communicating with her more frequently. Despite this, she maintained that she had nothing to do with the murder and claimed that the recordings the police found were fabricated to frame her and speed up the case. Tracy gave an alibi, saying she was at her parents' house in Arlington during the time. However, police were unable to find any witnesses to confirm her whereabouts because her relatives were away. Needing more evidence to prosecute, police searched Tracy's home. They believed Tracy killed David while he was sleeping by shooting him in the heart. Forensic experts believe David may not have had time to react while he was asleep. After David's death, Tracy immediately purchased a new mattress. A shopping list from a hardware store indicated that Tracy may have been involved in the events surrounding David's death. Donna believed that the only motive for the murder was the house itself. Tracy argued that David's death would not have benefited her financially and that she deserved to inherit his house. She claimed that there was no insurance policy in David's name that would have made her the beneficiary. Since they were not legally married, she could not claim any other assets. The motive for the crime is believed to have been both money and revenge for the breakdown of her relationship. After the murder, Tracy is said to have used a yellow styrofoam truck to transport David's body. It is suspected that she planned this from the beginning to divert the investigation. Using the truck, she moved the body by loading it onto a trolley secured with straps. Tracy then took the body to the construction site of a new home. Evidence, including fabric fibers, suggests that she attempted to dispose of David's body by throwing it into the sewer at the construction site, but was unsuccessful. She left the body on the ground and returned 2 days later to carry out her plan. During this time, she was recorded on surveillance cameras several times. She then planned to dispose of the body by cremation. Tracy wanted David to be completely burned, so she wrapped his body in several layers of electric blankets. Unfortunately for her, a passerby discovered the fire and alerted the fire department. Had her plan succeeded and gone undetected, she could have disposed of the body by throwing it into a storm drain. However, fate intervened and she was unable to carry out her plan. The next day, after returning to the police station a second time, Tracy was arrested and charged with the murder of David Nixon. During a preliminary hearing, the judge granted her bail but required her to wear an electronic monitoring device until the murder trial began. Despite her guilt, Tracy had many supporters, including Roland Taylor. Roland, a local dentist and neighbor of the couple, was originally from the United Kingdom but had settled in Texas. He and Tracy had been friends for a long time. Although he had heard many accusations against her, he was convinced that Tracy was the opposite of what people claimed. He believed that David's gambling debts had created many enemies who might want to harm him. He had spent a large amount of money at the casino, which suggested that police should consider other suspects with stronger motives. After investigation, it was discovered that David had no debts. Although he occasionally borrowed money and lost money at the casino, he always paid back the money to his creditors. This made that theory absurd. Roland and Tracy then had a romantic relationship after she was released on bail, which led to their engagement. He was determined to fight for justice and freedom for the woman he loved. He helped her find a competent lawyer. And in 2005, Tracy hired a criminal defense attorney who, although experienced, had only handled 3 murder cases. However, he believed that the evidence against Tracy was completely circumstantial and believed that he could successfully secure her acquittal. The defense argued that she had been arrested within the first 36 hours of the investigation, too early to thoroughly consider all potential suspects and properly assess her possible involvement. Typically, an arrest would occur when there is clear evidence, such as a criminal caught in the act with a weapon. However, this was not her case. Investigations generally take longer to effectively identify and narrow down suspects. The defense viewed the police actions as an attempt to quickly close the case by blaming the first person they encountered. Additionally, he argued that the prosecutor's office lacked direct evidence linking her to the murder, as no DNA or fingerprints of Tracy were found in the house or truck, nor was the alleged murder weapon, a gun, discovered. The prosecution relied on the testimony of several individuals who believed Tracy was guilty from the start due to her conflict with David. Their relationship was tumultuous. Shortly before his death, David had filed a restraining order against Tracy and stopped contacting her, even though they lived in the same home. Family members noted that David had tried to distance himself from his ex-wife. The attorney learned that the police had video footage of Tracy's interrogation and requested a copy. After reviewing the material, the defense attorney became convinced that the police used deceptive tactics to pressure Tracy into providing answers. The defense argued that the Supreme Court had intentionally portrayed Tracy in a negative light from the start. One of the prosecution's key pieces of evidence was video footage of Tracy abandoning her white Lexus, moving into a rental truck, and purchasing cleaning supplies at a store near where the body was discovered. By contacting the store clerk and obtaining a receipt from the woman in the video, it was discovered that she had used a discount card. The card was registered to Tracy, saving her 19 cents on her purchase. Tracy claimed that she did not remember having the card and insisted that she would not have left such evidence behind if she were trying to move around the city undetected. Tracy believed that she had been set up. Police believed that the cleaning products found during the search of the house matched those from a local hardware store. The defense attorney has offered several theories to explain David Nixon's death. One theory is that he may have been the victim of a robbery, while another suggests that the attack may have been a targeted attack on a gambling broker over debt. The defense has also pointed to other potential suspects who seem more likely than Tracy. One of these suspects is Jerry, a longtime friend of David's. They had vacationed together at a lake house, and Jerry frequently visited their home, where he knew Tracy well. The woman suggested that Jerry may have borrowed money from David, which could have been a motive for the murder. The police decided to investigate Jerry, who quickly admitted that he understood Tracy's attempt to blame him. He was an easy target because he was a close friend of David's. Although he occasionally borrowed money from David, he denied any involvement in the case. According to Jerry, he sold his old car 2 months before the tragedy because he needed money. He asked David for a large sum of money, and David agreed to help him. However, after Christmas, Jerry paid David back all of the money. Jerry did mention that he and David had planned to have a drink that day. The last time he heard David's voice was early in the morning of the day David was murdered. On the morning of David's murder, Jerry and David spoke on the phone and made plans to meet. However, David never showed up and stopped answering his phone. It was only later that Jerry discovered what really happened. Jerry claimed that he had not seen David that day and that since there was no debt between them, he had no reason to commit the crime. When this lead failed, Tracy pointed to another potential suspect, David's first wife, Donna. Just 2 months before his death, David had purchased a $500,000 life insurance policy in New Mexico, naming their son as the primary beneficiary and Donna as the secondary beneficiary. Since the boy was too young at the time, Donna received the payout after David died. Tracy was not named on these policies, leading her to believe that Donna would benefit from David's death. After David's death, Donna received a small sum of about $10,000, which would help her support her son. She found it absurd to think that the money was a motive for the murder, noting that David would have paid her more in child support while he was alive. Meanwhile, Nicholas's son insisted that only Tracy could have harmed his father, as he had witnessed their violent arguments. Tracy's attorney argued that the prosecutor's office lacked solid evidence against her and that police had not thoroughly investigated other potential suspects since David's murder. Tracy and her attorney eventually went to trial, confident of their chances of winning because they had dismissed the prosecutor's allegations. However, the prosecution was convinced of Tracy's guilt, describing her as an unstable and aggressive. The motive behind the case centers on a house, which poses a serious threat because the David may contest the re-registration of the property in Tracy's name and reclaim it. The attorney repeatedly argued that the charges lacked forensic evidence. There were no witnesses and the murder weapon had not yet been found. The defense believed that the available evidence would not be sufficient to support the charges. Tracy believed that the case was a carefully orchestrated plot, asserting that she had been wrongly accused. She felt that the police had not investigated the case thoroughly. The prosecutor had important information from Nicholas, the David's son. Nicholas claimed that his father had kept the same pistol in a safe in the bedroom of the home David shared with Tracy. However, police were unable to find the weapon for ballistics testing. Nicholas believed that the Tracy had opened the safe, used the gun, and then discarded it. Tracy, on the other hand, claimed that David had never kept a pistol in the home and that she had never seen one. However, she could not explain why she had purchased a new mattress so soon after David's death. It appeared that the old mattress had blood on it and had become a crime scene. The prosecution said that the store staff recognized Tracy and confirmed that she had purchased a large quantity of cleaning products that could be used to remove blood. They advised Tracy to use hydrochloric acid, but it was not available in stores, so they suggested she order it online. She also purchased other items, all of which were later found in Tracy's home during a search. The prosecutor's office believed that the evidence allowed them to piece together the events of the case. The defense attempted to suggest that Donna could be the likely killer due to her strong motive. However, Nicholas's mother only received $10,000, which was insufficient to consider a violent act. They also tried to implicate David's second wife, Lisa, in the murder. Police conducted a thorough analysis of potential involvement by Donna and Lisa, examining cell phone records and geolocation data. Ultimately, they found no connection to the crime. Additionally, both Donna and Lisa had a positive relationship with David, which was confirmed by numerous witnesses. They also had credible alibis, and Lisa had no motive whatsoever. By the end of the trial, Tracy's confidence had plummeted. She expressed her frustration by saying, "I don't believe in justice anymore. I don't know how I'm going to feel after this." The trial lasted 2 weeks, and the jury found Tracy guilty of murdering David Nixon. They reached a verdict in less than 4 hours, resulting in her being sentenced to 40 years in prison. The victim's family was completely satisfied with the outcome, and many felt relieved. Roland Taylor stayed loyal to his fiancée, insisting on her innocence and visiting her in prison. With his support, Tracy filed an appeal, but it was ultimately denied. She will be eligible for parole in 2024 when she turns 55. Welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Jastine Valdez. On May 19, 2018, 24 years old Jastine Valdez went about her daily routine as usual. After finishing paperwork for her residency permit, she went to the gym and worked out until around 4:20 p.m. Then, she planned to head home. Her mother, Terrace, asked her to pick up some bread on the way, so Valdez stopped at the store before catching the 185 bus to Bray, which left after 6:09 p.m. The bus dropped Jastine off at a familiar stop near her rural home, from which she normally walked the final 15 minutes to her doorstep. However, when Jastine failed to arrive home, her mother Teres became worried. Teres was used to Jastine being on time and communicating regularly, but when she couldn't reach her daughter by phone or message, she started to get anxious. As the hours passed with no word from Jastine, Teres decided to go out and look for her. Teres's daughter Jastine was expected to return home by bus, but when she failed to arrive, Teres became increasingly worried and frantic. She stopped people on the street and asked if they had seen Jastine, describing her Asian features and the sporty clothes she was wearing. Despite several people claiming to have spotted Jastine getting off the bus, her disappearance remained a complete mystery. Teres's worry escalated as each passing minute brought no new information about Jastine's whereabouts or safety. Teres was overwhelmed by anxiety and eventually reported Jastine missing to the police, in the hope that they could locate her. Detectives promptly started investigating Jastine's vanishing and initiated a thorough search. They looked into her daily routine and questioned people who knew her to explore every possibility, including whether Jastine had left of her own free will. Jastine Valdez lived with her parents, Teres and Daniel, in the quiet Irish countryside. Her parents had moved to Ireland from the Philippines in search of a better life and brought Jastine to join them in 2015. Despite struggling financially, Jastine's parents worked hard to support her education and well-being. Jastine was a responsible and diligent student, studying accounting at university while working part-time jobs to help pay for her studies and support her family. She worked as a waitress in Bray and as a childcare provider in her neighborhood, and even lived in the servant quarters of a large estate where her parents worked as a gardener and housekeeper. Jastine was known for being reliable, hardworking, and dedicated to her responsibilities. Given her close relationship with her family and her strong sense of duty, it was unthinkable that she would voluntarily leave them behind. Her limited social life and lack of typical teenage rebellion also made it seem unlikely that she would run away. Despite efforts to contact everyone who knew Jastine, no one had any information about her disappearance. As a 24 years old, Jastine had long since moved past her teenage years and was very close to her family, making it unlikely that she would run away. She kept her parents informed about her daily activities, and on the day she went missing, she and her mother exchanged 63 messages. The last message was at 6:24 p.m. when Jastine got off the bus. During the investigation, a crucial tip came from Jastine's coworkers. A woman who was driving by with her 12-year-old son reported a disturbing incident to the police. She claimed to have seen a man pushing a woman who looked like Jastine into the trunk of a black Nissan Qashqai. This incident happened just minutes after Jastine got off the bus, and the police were quickly alerted to the situation. A second motorist soon came across a disturbing scene. An Asian girl was sitting in the back of a vehicle, tapping on the window and clearly frightened. The driver was initially unsure of what to make of the situation, but after discussing it with his wife when he got home, he realized the seriousness of what he had seen. He immediately called the authorities at 7:20 p.m. to report a possible kidnapping. Around the same time, another driver contacted the police to report a suspicious Nissan vehicle driving erratically about 6 kilometers from NS car. Patrol officers quickly responded to the location given by the initial female caller. When they arrived, they found Jastine's broken cell phone and a bag of bread on the roadside, which raised serious concerns for her safety. Based on this evidence, investigators believed that the kidnapper had targeted Jastine while she was walking home from the bus stop. The kidnapper had tried to put Jastine in the trunk of the car, but she resisted. He then forced her into the back seat and drove away to an unknown location. The suspect's black Nissan was immediately put on the wanted list, and a large search effort began, involving patrol cars and helicopters. However, The search was difficult due to the darkness of the night, and no immediate leads were found. When daylight came, the search resumed, and detectives re-examined eyewitness accounts and narrowed down the list of potential suspects. Mark Hennessy, a 40-year-old man, was identified as a person of interest in the investigation because his appearance matched the description of the kidnapper. Police officers visited Mark Hennessy's home, but his wife, Nicola, had no idea where he was. She told them that he had left for a drink after work the day before and hadn't returned. This new information raised even more suspicions about Mark, leading investigators to look deeper into his past. Mark seemed like a model citizen. He was a devoted husband and father of 2 young daughters, with a stable job as an estimator on construction sites. He came from a respected family and lived in a wealthy neighborhood with other young families. He had no prior run-ins with the law and appeared to be a pillar of the community. However, the police knew that people can often hide their true nature behind a mask of respectability. Police officers visited the bar Mark had gone to the night before to ask questions and gather information. The bar staff confirmed that Mark had been there, but only stayed for a short time to have a beer and watch a soccer match around 5:40 p.m. He left the bar in a visibly agitated state and returned around midnight, staying only for 10 minutes before driving away in his car at 11 p.m. After further review, it was discovered that Mark had actually returned to the bar's entrance to chat with someone before leaving again. A review of the bar's CCTV footage confirmed the staff's accounts of Mark's brief visits. However, this still left a gap in his whereabouts between 5:40 p.m. and 11 p.m., and investigators remained unsure of what Mark had done during this time. Meanwhile, detectives also obtained CCTV footage of the bus route that Jastine had taken, which led to a disturbing discovery. Mark's black Nissan was spotted following the bus just 30 minutes after he left the bar, raising suspicions about his involvement in Jastine's disappearance. As the search for Mark's car and Jastine continued, it became increasingly clear that the incidents were connected, and Mark emerged as the prime suspect in her abduction. Despite efforts to track his cell phone, Mark managed to stay one step ahead of the authorities. He made a single call to his wife, telling her he would be away for a while, but refused to surrender to the police even when his family begged him to do so. The investigators learned about the encounter from Mark's parents, and as a result, they strengthened their search for Mark. However, Mark remained elusive. The police turned to the public for help, issuing appeals through the media and asking anyone with information about Jastine, Mark, or his car to come forward. One person responded to the appeal, spotting a Nissan that matched the description of Mark's car. She followed the vehicle to Cherrywood Park, where she observed the driver closely before notifying the authorities. When the police arrived, they found a man covered in blood sitting behind the wheel. Mark refused to leave his vehicle, even when police tried to persuade him. He threatened them with a knife, so they had to shoot him to protect themselves. The bullet hit Mark in the shoulder. When police took him out of the car, he was awake but not cooperating. They searched the vehicle, hoping to find Jastine, but she was not there. Police questioned Mark repeatedly, but he wouldn't answer. Medical staff treated his injuries, and he was rushed to the hospital. Doctors fought to save Mark's life, hoping he would reveal Jastine's location. Unfortunately, the bullet had bounced off and hit Mark in the head, killing him. Further investigation showed that the blood on Mark's face and body was his own, and he had several new stab wounds on his arm and neck. The police speculated that Mark, driven by a fear of being caught, had used a knife from his vehicle to prepare for a confrontation. When they finally caught him, the officers felt a sense of disappointment. They had found Mark and his vehicle, but their main goal was still unfulfilled. They had not found the missing person, Jastine. At the scene, they found a note, but it was difficult to read due to the presence of blood. The officers were, however, able to decipher the words "sorry" and "Pease Castle," which provided a lead in the search for Jastine. The search for Jastine Valdez continued despite the dim hopes of her safe return. As her anxious parents prayed for her well-being, a thorough search was conducted in a wooded area south of Dublin, guided by a cryptic clue found near a castle. The search yielded Jastine's purse, which contained her identification documents. Unfortunately, on May 21st, the search party discovered Jastine's body. The autopsy revealed that Jastine had been murdered on the evening of her abduction, with manual strangulation being the cause of death. Further examination showed that she had been subjected to a sexual assault, adding to the brutality of her demise. Amidst the sorrow and despair, a disturbing revelation emerged from the toxicological analysis. Jastine's body contained trace amounts of prohibited substances. The presence of these substances raised many questions, with no clear explanation for their origin or purpose. Add a surprising twist to the case. Test results showed that Mark had ingested a substantial amount of these substances, making the circumstances surrounding the tragic events even more complex and difficult to understand. Mark's life had been spiraling out of control due to his struggles with alcohol and substance abuse, which likely contributed to the drugs found in Jastine's system. His home life was also deteriorating, with frequent arguments with his spouse over his addiction and growing debts. Investigations revealed that Mark was actively using the dating app Tinder, where he was pursuing interactions with multiple women, including flirting with them at bars. Furthermore, his DNA was found on Jastine's body, solidifying the police's suspicions of his involvement in her abduction and murder. As detectives pieced together the evidence, a disturbing narrative emerged. The murder was driven by Mark's sexual motives, and Jastine became an innocent victim in his sinister quest. Mark had spotted Jastine while following a bus and seized the opportunity to grab her off the street in broad daylight, despite the presence of multiple witnesses. A thorough examination of the victims' and perpetrators' phones revealed that they had no prior connection or communication. They had never met before, and there were no mutual connections between them. This grim revelation highlighted the tragic randomness of Jastine's fate and the calculated brutality of Mark's actions. Upon closer examination, the detectives' initial assessment of the case changed significantly. It became clear that Mark was very familiar with the route Jastine often took, suggesting that her murder was planned in advance rather than a spontaneous act. Mark had been carefully watching her movements, waiting for the right moment to strike. The day of the abduction was a deliberate break from his usual routine, as he intentionally positioned himself at the bus stop, following Jastine's every move until he attacked her. The local community was deeply shaken by the tragic event, as such heinous acts were rare in their otherwise peaceful neighborhood. Many people rallied around the Jastine family, offering them comfort and support during their time of immense loss. At the farewell ceremony, heartfelt tributes were paid to Jastine, and white balloons were released into the sky, symbolizing hope in the midst of despair. Some attendees wore pink T-shirts with Jastine's image, a touching tribute to her memory. Jastine's family eventually decided to return to their native Philippines to lay her to rest, seeking comfort in familiar surroundings. However, they initially stayed abroad for a period before returning to Ireland in 2021, seeking a fresh start and new opportunities. They relocated to a different city and pursued new careers, which allowed them to heal from the painful memories that haunted them in their former home. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Nicholas Billingham. Fiona Beale was a kind and friendly woman who was devoted to her job and adored by her students. She lived with her partner, 42-year-old Nicholas Billingham, in Northampton, a large town in England. Fiona and Nicholas had been together for 17 years and, like many couples, they experienced their share of highs and lows. Leslie, a friend of them, described them as content. Leslie recalled that she had thought Fiona was really nice. Leslie mentioned that they hadn't displayed overt affection but seemed happy. Nicholas's history with women suggested that his relationships were often short-lived. His relationship with Fiona ended abruptly in November 2021, but it wasn't due to the usual reasons. The breakup occurred after they were required to isolate themselves for 10 days. After the breakup, Nicholas maintained contact with his friends and family, revealing to his mother that he had left with a woman named Faye and was happy with his new life. Meanwhile, Fiona completed her 10-day isolation period, recovered, and eventually returned to work. She received supportive messages from her colleagues when she returned to work. However, the split had a lasting impact on her. By the end of February 2022, nearly 4 months after the breakup, her mental health began to decline significantly. The memories of Nicholas in her Northampton home became overwhelming, so she decided to move to Cumbria, a 200-mile distance from her previous home. On March 15, 2022, her family grew concerned after reading her text messages. Their worry prompted them to contact the police. The police found Fiona severely injured in a bath at her Lake District Lodge rental. Officer Josh Parkin testified in court that when he arrived, ominous music was playing from her phone, and he initially thought she was dead. Parkin described the scene, stating that he had found a completely naked female lying in the bath. Music was playing from a mobile phone next to her. He immediately called for an ambulance and suggested they try to get her out of the bath to administer CPR. She then became partially conscious. To check her responsiveness, he had pulled her ear firmly, and she had moaned, trying to turn over. They had sat her up, and she had become emotional. Parkin had discovered a blue leather-bound notebook with a logo on the front. A quick glance had revealed it was a personal document detailing her mental health struggles at the time. Fiona's notebook revealed a dark history of abuse and a sinister plot. She wrote about her husband Nicholas's cruel behavior, including spitting on her and threatening her during intimate contact. She started planning her revenge as Tulip 22, a reckless and ruthless alter ego. Fiona described how she planned and executed the murder, using a knife and an eye mask to carry out the crime. She hid the body in the bathroom and later moved it to the garden, where it was buried under multiple layers of materials. The police initially dismissed Fiona's notebook as ramblings, but upon re-examining it, they found disturbing details that led them to investigate further. They searched Fiona's house and found a blood-stained mattress in the cellar. On March 19th, forensic officers and a cadaver dog discovered Nicholas's remains in the garden, wrapped in carpet and buried under various materials. Fiona's notebook revealed her regret and apology for the crime, but also her anger and hurt towards her husband. The body was found with a sleep mask covering the eyes, bearing the phrase, "This is my morning after" face on the inside. The police spokesman described the scene as showing utter contempt, as the body was wrapped in cables, hose pipes, and plastic bags, mixed with debris from a building. An autopsy was conducted the day after the discovery. The results confirmed that the cause of death was a single stab wound to the right side of the neck, damaging the right jugular vein, esophagus, and trachea. The injury was inflicted with moderate force. Following the investigation, police arrested Fiona Beale on March 22, 2022, charging her with the murder of Nicholas Billingham. Nicholas's family was shocked and heartbroken when they learned of his death, particularly after discovering that Fiona had sent texts to them and Nicholas's friends from his own phone. Following the police investigation into Nicholas' death on November 1, 2021, it was discovered that Fiona attempted to cover her tracks in the days that followed. As part of her plan, Fiona claimed to infection, which would have given her a 10-day period of isolation, during which she would not be disturbed. Fiona's actions during this 10-day period were inconsistent with the severe symptoms she claimed to be experiencing due to the infection. On November 2, with Fiona using Nicholas's Amazon account, and later her own, to purchase various cleaning supplies, including products for Venetian blinds, a new mop and bucket, heavy-duty trash bags, a new mattress, bedding, clothing, wall art, and mirrors. Later that day, Fiona made changes to her order, adding 3 rolls of duct tape to a delivery that already included multiple cleaning products. She also made a separate purchase at 2:19 p.m., buying heavy-duty gardening gloves, a stainless steel digging spade, and a garden incinerator. These items would later be used to dispose of a body. Nearly 2 weeks after Nicholas's death, Fiona went shopping again. On November 13th, supermarket cameras caught her buying various items, including building materials that she would later use to construct a grave. The police released the CCTV footage of this shopping trip. Fiona also impersonated Nicholas by sending texts to his family and friends for several months. She even invited Nicholas's mother to visit her at home. Nicholas's mother, Miss Valentine, reported that Fiona had invited her over for a Christmas drink on December 23, 2021. Unbeknownst to Miss Valentine, her son's body was buried in Fiona's back garden at the time. Fiona Beale appeared to be living a normal life, showing no signs of depression or trauma after the incident. During the trial, Fiona initially denied any wrongdoing but later admitted to taking Nicholas's life, claiming it was an involuntary act. However, the prosecutor disagreed with her account. He presented evidence that Nicholas had been unfaithful to Fiona throughout their 17-year relationship, cheating on her with multiple women. Despite Nicholas's infidelity, Fiona had taken him back on multiple occasions. The prosecutor revealed that one of Nicholas's affairs had resulted in a child. Instead of leaving Nicholas, Fiona allegedly planned and executed murder, carefully considering how to kill him, dispose of his body, and cover her tracks. She also prepared explanations for his disappearance and her own absence from work on the day of the crime. Defense attorney Andrew Wheeler addressed the jury after the prosecution's opening argument, stating that Fiona had struggled with her mental health for years due to Nicholas Billingham's controlling behavior. He emphasized that Fiona, a 49-year-old woman with a good reputation, was a hardworking and well-liked school teacher who had been in a 17-year partnership with the victim. Wheeler asked the jury to consider how someone with Fiona's good character could commit such a crime. Wheeler stressed that the key issue in the case was her state of mind at the time of the killing. Wheeler explained that Fiona had struggled with her mental health for years and suggested that Nicholas Billingham's psychologically dominating behavior had gradually worn her down. Fiona Beale admitted her wrongdoing. She then shared details about her personal life and relationship with Nicholas at Northampton Crown Court. Fiona revealed that she had been prescribed antidepressants during her university years. She described Nicholas as caring and attentive at the start of their relationship, but claimed he gradually changed over time. Fiona alleged that Billingham's behavior became increasingly controlling, particularly when it came to cleaning. She recalled an incident where she had left a cloth with cleaner on it, which stained a worktop. Although it seemed minor at first, cleaning became a major issue throughout their relationship. Instead of laughing off mistakes, Fiona said she would get scolded by Billingham. She also described how meal times became rigid and inflexible, with everything having to be exactly as Nicholas wanted it. Over time, this behavior escalated and continued until the end of their relationship. Even small things, like the way items were placed in cupboards, became a point of contention, with Nicholas insisting that they face outwards. Fiona testified that Nicholas's behavior escalated from joking insults to cruel comments, which made her lose confidence. She also shared that before taking Nicholas's life, she warned him that she would kill him if he ever treated another woman the way he treated her. The judge stated that considering the severity of the crime, he sentenced Fiona to a minimum of 20 years in prison. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Austina and Vinkle Reed. Austina and Vinkle Reed was born on June 6, 2001, in Esperanza, where she grew up in a big As the baby of the family, she naturally received extra attention and affection. People who knew her described her as outgoing, kind-hearted, and always wearing a bright smile. On January 12, 2019, Augustina's father drove her to a friend's house, where a group of about 6 friends were meeting up. They planned to go to Teo's, a nightclub with a bowling alley, later that night. Augustina had already made plans to sleep over at her friend's house, and her father knew about these plans. Augustina left a club in the afternoon and went home. Later that night, she asked her boyfriend Noel to join her at the club, but he declined, saying he was tired. Augustina and her friends had a great time at the club, dancing and enjoying the music until 5 a.m., when they decided to leave. However, she ran into another group of friends and decided to stay longer. At 5:40 a.m., a surveillance camera showed Augustina leaving the club, carrying her phone. She then went to a nearby fast food stand, where she waited in line, got her order, and chatted briefly with someone she knew. After that, she headed towards the road. Since the friend's house where she was staying the night was close by, Augustina decided to walk. It was getting light, and she didn't seem concerned about her safety. There were no sidewalks, so she walked along the side of the road. Augustina's whereabouts on the night in question are unclear, but video footage shows she walked steadily despite wearing high-heeled platform shoes. The only moment of instability was when she approached the driveway, which is understandable given that it's an unpaved road with rocks. However, Augustina failed to arrive at her friend's house or her own home, which was unusual because she always kept her parents informed of her location. But on this occasion, when morning came, her parents didn't receive a text from her saying she had arrived safely. Concerned, Augustina's father, Daniel and Vinkle Reed, contacted the police and began searching for his daughter on his own. After starting their investigation, police officers went to Teo's club to interview potential witnesses and review the available surveillance footage, since they knew Augustina had spent the entire night there. Meanwhile, a friend of Augustina's, Brian, reached out to her father, Daniel, and told him that he had seen Augustina outside Teo's club around 6 a.m. Brian was driving by when he noticed Augustina standing on the side of the road, talking to the driver of a silver car that had pulled over next to her. Brian continued driving down the road, but quickly pulled out his phone and called Augustina to check on her. He asked if she was all right and if she needed a ride home. Augustina replied that she was fine. Augustina accepted Brian's offer for a ride, saying she was headed to a friend's house. Brian decided to wait for her at a nearby gas station, which was just a few hundred meters away from where he first spotted her. He would fill up his car while waiting. However, 15 minutes passed, and Augustina failed to appear at the gas station. Brian then went to look for her, but she was nowhere to be found. Despite trying to contact her, Brian was unsuccessful as Augustina did not answer her phone. At the time, Brian didn't think much of it, assuming that Augustina had simply gone straight to her friend's house and forgotten that he was waiting. The main clue in this situation was the silver car. Although Brian couldn't identify the exact brand and model, he described it as fairly old. The man in the driver's seat may have been the last person to see Augustina before she disappeared. Police didn't rule out the possibility that he was involved in her disappearance. They tracked her cell phone signal and found that the last recorded signal was from a tower near the Taos Club. The search team focused on the vacant lots and fields around the club, which is on the outskirts of town. A nearby gas station was the only business with surveillance cameras along the road Augustina was walking on. Daniel, Augustina's father, reviewed the footage to see if his daughter had passed by the gas station. Since her friend's house was nearby, it's likely that Augustina would have walked past the gas station. The attendant showed Daniel the footage after he explained the situation and asked for help. The camera had recorded footage from that morning, but the attendant almost lost his job as a result. Later, the gas station owner fired the employee for letting someone watch the security footage without permission. However, when the townspeople found out, they boycotted the gas station, which led the owner to rehire the employee and apologize. Daniel reviewed the gas station's footage and couldn't find his daughter on it. It seemed Austina never made it there. But the footage did show an old silver car, the same one Brian had described earlier, passing by the gas station around the time Austina was walking on the road. The car was a Renault, and Daniel identified its owner as Pablo Trianfini, a 39-year-old garbage collector who lived nearby. Pablo had no prior convictions but had been on the police's radar several times. The first incident occurred in 2017 when Trianfini's ex-wife reported him to the police for physical abuse, leading to a court order that banned him from approaching her. He was arrested again in the same year for violating this order. After reviewing the surveillance footage, the police identified the silver car. However, upon learning that Daniel had already seen the video, they worried that a violent attack might occur and rushed to Pablo Trianfini's residence. When they arrived, they found a crowd gathered outside, shouting, "Where is Austina?" The crowd dispersed after the police arrived, and someone informed the officers that Trianfini was inside the house. Trianfini had peeked out, but upon seeing the hostile crowd, he retreated back inside and locked the door. The police did not have sufficient reason to forcibly enter the house, so they requested a search warrant. While waiting for the search warrant, the police cordoned off the house to prevent Trianfini from escaping. Around midnight, an officer checked the yard and discovered that Pablo Trianfini had died. The officer rushed to assist, but it was too late, and Trianfini was deceased. Such a turn of events made Pablo Trianfini's involvement in Augustina's disappearance clear. However, after searching his house and car, the police still found no evidence. Trianfini attempted to deflect further suspicion by using a rope, but its purpose was unclear. As the police searched Trianfini's house, his neighbor approached them. The neighbor stated that earlier that day, Pablo had borrowed a shovel, claiming he needed to dig for earthworms for a fishing trip. About 30 minutes later, Trianfini returned the shovel and made a comment that struck his neighbor as odd. He thanked the neighbor and said, "Thank you, I don't know if I'll ever see you again." Witnesses reported seeing Trianfini leave his house multiple times on Sunday, riding his bicycle while carrying a shovel. This behavior suggested that Austina might no longer be alive. On Monday, January 14, 2019, a search operation began at dawn, aided by drones and police dogs. At 9:15 a.m., Augustina's partially clothed body was found approximately 500 meters away from Taos Club, hidden in a ditch with dense vegetation. The forensic investigation revealed that Austina had fiercely defended herself, resulting in defensive wounds on her hands and her attacker's skin under her fingernails. DNA analysis confirmed that Pablo Trianfini was the perpetrator. The cause of death was determined to be strangulation. The circumstances surrounding Augustina's entry into Trianfini's car remain unclear. It is unknown whether she was coerced or accepted a ride voluntarily. With both parties now unable to share their accounts, the truth may never be fully known. A search of Trianfini's phone did not yield any evidence of prior communication or connection with Austina. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Marisella Bella Valadez. Marisella Bella Valadez was born in 1997 in Seattle, Washington. As the eldest of two children in a Latin American family, she was known for being a kind, outgoing young woman with many friends. She excelled in school and went on to attend a prestigious university after graduating. Marisella was a stunning young woman with a petite frame, long brunette hair, and big brown eyes. She was always the center of attention and loved being around people, often attending lively parties and making the most of every day. On October 3, 2020, Marisella traveled to Dallas to visit old friends, but she planned to return by Monday morning. Her brother was supposed to pick her up from the airport on October 5th, and they would head to the university together. However, when the plane arrived, Marisella was nowhere to be found. A search for the missing student began when her brother realized she wasn't among the passengers who had disembarked from the flight. He tried to call her, but her phone was turned off. He then contacted their parents to inform them of the situation. Marisella's disappearance was unusual, as she was a responsible and serious young woman who would not normally miss university classes without warning. Marisella's family reached out to her friends in Dallas to gather information about her possible whereabouts and her last known location. Their efforts led them to a popular club in the city, where she was spotted partying with friends the night before her disappearance. While there, she had met a man named Chuck and they had danced and socialized together over drinks. After that, they of them left the club, and Marisella was not seen again. When her family was unable to reach her by phone, they grew extremely concerned and frightened, prompting them to quickly report her disappearance to the police. She had purchased tickets for a flight to Seattle, but she never boarded the plane. Her whereabouts since that night were unknown. To investigate further, it was crucial to identify the new person she had met, their destination, and whether she had left with them voluntarily. Reviewing surveillance footage from outside the club, authorities observed Marisella exiting with a young man, but his face was not clearly visible on the video. According to the footage, Marisella appeared to be walking with a man voluntarily before getting into a black Audi car and driving off in an unknown direction. Several days had passed since her disappearance, and she had not contacted anyone, logged into her social media accounts, or made any transactions on her bank cards. The police urgently needed to identify the stranger she was with to determine where to search for them. One of her friends reported that the companion might be named Chuck, but this information was not enough. However, street camera footage helped investigators determine the direction the car had traveled. Further review of supermarket security footage revealed that they had stopped to shop, appearing happy and affectionate towards each other. The footage showed Marisella selecting drinks and candies, while he paid for the items using a card in the name of Charles Beltran. It became clear that Marisella had left with Beltran, a 31-year-old musician who was gaining popularity as a local rap star. However, Beltran had a troubled past, having been to prison twice for robbery and armed assault. He had been released on parole after serving less than 3 years and was on the verge of releasing his own music album. An investigation revealed that Marisella's phone had been active at a specific location on the night she went missing. The location was linked to a house owned by a woman named Lisa Dyke, who was renting a room to Beltran. When police and an FBI agent investigating Marisella's disappearance visited the house, they found it empty. The police were only able to reach Lisa Dyke by phone, as she said she was out of state for work. She confirmed that Charles Beltran had been renting a room in her home, but claimed he had moved out about 2 weeks ago. She also stated that she had no idea where he was after that. They searched the house where he used to live and made several alarming discoveries. The interior was a disaster zone with mess and unsanitary conditions everywhere. It appeared as if the residents had departed abruptly, only taking essential belongings and abandoning the rest. Dirty dishes were stacked high in the sink, old food and mold sat on the kitchen table, and garbage covered the corners of the floor. In stark contrast, investigators found multiple empty bottles of cleaning supplies scattered around, and there were also remnants on the floor and carpet indicating an attempt to scrub areas clean. A disturbing black statue of death, draped in a black cloak and grasping a scythe, occupied one of the upstairs rooms. While it could have been dismissed as an eccentric decoration, its presentation as a makeshift altar, complete with wax candles, dried flowers, and 2 metal bowls, suggested a more sinister purpose. The setup bore an uncanny resemblance to the Mexican cult of Santa Muerte, which reveres a female embodiment of death. The house exuded an atmosphere of foreboding, as if a traumatic event had occurred, prompting the occupants to hastily gather their belongings and flee in a state of panic. A more thorough investigation was conducted using specialized tools to detect blood traces. This revealed multiple wiped blood stains in one of the bedrooms, the bathroom, and the hallway. The bedroom with the most significant bloodstains belonged to Charles, suggesting a violent crime had occurred there. However, the identity of the victim remained unclear. Despite attempts to clean the area, the blood had penetrated the carpet, seeped under the baseboards, and stained the wallpaper and furniture. To confirm the source of the blood, experts compared the samples with Marisella's DNA. The results eliminated any remaining doubts, confirming that the blood belonged to Marisella. The police had to seal the house as a crime scene, but their next challenge was to track down the main suspect, potential accomplices, and witnesses. However, this proved to be a difficult task as Charles had already fled the scene, and the owner had quickly put the house up for sale even before the police arrived. To gather more information, the police decided to investigate the people who had recently lived in the house. According to the neighbors, who described a complicated love triangle, 3 individuals had lived in the house: 57-year-old Lisa Dyke, 48-year-old Nina Morano, and 31-year-old Charles Beltran. However, the nature of their relationships and the reason for their sudden disappearance remained unclear. To move forward with the investigation, the police needed to look into each person's background and find them as soon as possible for questioning. The owner of the house, who was the only one reachable by phone, was a well-known lawyer with a commanding and ambitious personality. She had been married 3 times and had inherited a substantial amount of money after becoming a widow several years ago. Given her financial situation, it was unclear why she had rented a room to Charles, as she was not known for her charitable nature, suggesting that she may have had an ulterior motive. Charles Beltran, also known as Chuck, had big dreams of becoming a successful rapper. However, his lack of funds and connections, combined with a troubled past, made it difficult for him to get started. That was until he met Dyke, who offered him a helping hand. She took him in, setting up a small recording studio in her home, and even funded the production of several music videos to help launch his career. Dyke also provided Chuck with a car, paid for his social expenses, and bought him stylish clothing. Despite her significant financial investment in Chuck, Dyke maintained that their relationship was purely professional, insisting that she saw great potential in the young rapper and was simply investing in his future. The situation with Nina Morano was particularly interesting. She had been in a long-term relationship with Lisa, and after Lisa's husband passed away, they women no longer hid their romance. In fact, they had gotten married just a few months prior. Nina moved in with Lisa, who was already living with a young musician named Charles. Although Lisa denied it, a close friend claimed that she had a romantic relationship with Charles, and Lisa had even confided in her friend about how great he was as a lover. It seemed that Lisa was deeply in love with Charles, as evidenced by her efforts to look younger, including losing 55 pounds, changing her image, wearing bright makeup, and getting tattoos. Lisa had also made some significant changes to her life, including evicting her adult children from the home, citing that they were interfering with her personal life. Charles, on the other hand, had a clear interest in staying with Lisa, who was wealthy and could help him financially and advance his music career. However, as a physically attractive man, Charles often engaged in casual flings with young women, which made Lisa extremely jealous. But what was Nina Morano's role in all of this, and specifically, what did she have to do with Marisella's disappearance? According to a close friend, Lisa's spouse, Na, was also involved in the unusual love triangle with Lisa and he. Na was a successful lawyer and a wealthy woman. The 3 of them lived a life of luxury together. After they got married, both women took his last name, Beltran, and the 3 of them lived together in the house. But what happened to the people who lived in the house where Marisella's blood was discovered? After Marisella disappeared, no one was seen at home again. Lisa was contacted once and answered a few questions, claiming she was in another state, but her phone was unreachable after that. There was no information about Na's whereabouts or the main suspect, Charles. On the night of October 5th, investigators monitored the mobile phone signals of the 3 residents and the missing person, Marisella, and found that all 4 signals were coming from within the house. By early morning, the signals had moved to a remote wooded area in suburban Dallas. Shortly after, the signals vanished. A few days later, Lisa briefly responded to messages on her secondary work phone, but it soon became unreachable as well. Using geolocation data from the mobile devices, authorities reconstructed the group's route that night, identifying the stops they made along the way. This information led them to suspect that the missing student's body might have been disposed of in this area. Although this narrowed down the search radius, the area was vast and challenging to navigate, hindering the progress of the investigation. The search for the missing Seattle student was suspended near the new year, as no body or clues were found. However, in March 2021, a local hunter discovered a human skull in the woods that appeared to be relatively recent. The hunter immediately reported the find to the police, who then sent the remains to a forensic laboratory for examination. Dental records confirmed that the remains belonged to the missing student, who had been gone for nearly 6 months. Although the body was badly decomposed and damaged by wild animals, making it impossible to determine the exact cause of death, forensic analysis revealed characteristic marks on the bones that suggested knife wounds. However, it was unclear whether these wounds were fatal. After the authorities found the body in the forest, they quickly identified the first suspects and tracked down Lisa, who had moved to Florida with her partner, Na. They had rented a house in Miami near the ocean. However, when the police arrived, only Na was apprehended, while Lisa went into hiding after learning about the situation. Charles, another suspect, was nowhere to be found, although he occasionally contacted his former girlfriends through messaging apps. In one of his last messages, Charles warned his acquaintances that the police were closing in and that they should be extremely careful. Meanwhile, Na, who was now in custody, denied any involvement in Marisella's disappearance, claiming she knew nothing about what had happened to her. Lisa, on the other hand, used her connections to try to hire a good lawyer for Na. While in Florida, Na attempted to sell her house in South Carolina as quickly as possible, likely to raise funds for their continued hiding or to flee the country. Authorities eventually tracked down Lisa and arrested her, and both women were taken back to Dallas. During initial questioning, neither woman provided any information, and their bail was set at $500,000 each. They were able to post bail and were released to house arrest, but were required to wear tracking devices that allowed authorities to monitor their movements. In August of the same year, Charles made a daring escape attempt, but police were hot on his trail and tracked him down to Utah, where he was hiding at the home of a former girlfriend. She, who had a 5-year-old son with Charles, was overjoyed to see him and didn't ask questions about his sudden return. When Charles was arrested, he initially refused to cooperate with the police or answer their questions. He was counting on his wealthy lover to use her influence and wealth to hire a top-notch lawyer to get him out of trouble. However, things took a dramatic turn on Christmas Eve in 2021. Lisa and Nina, who had been released on bail, suddenly went dark when their tracking bracelet stopped working due to the holiday chaos and high activity. The police didn't send a team to the suspect's location until the next day, but by then, they had already vanished. It was later discovered that the suspects had been carefully planning their escape for months. As a result, by the time the police pursued them, they had already crossed the border into Mexico undetected. From Mexico, they traveled to South Korea by air, and their trail eventually went cold in Cambodia. The FBI teamed up with the Cambodian police and immigration authorities to locate the suspects on the run. They women first raised suspicions after making a large cash withdrawal from an ATM, prompting authorities to monitor their movements. They tried to pay for everything in cash to stay under the radar, but security footage helped reveal their whereabouts. An ATM camera identified the fugitives, and another camera caught the license plate of the vehicle they arrived in. The vehicle's owner cooperated with police and took them to the residence where the foreign women were living extravagantly. They were recaptured in February 2022 and sent back to the United States, where they were taken into custody without the possibility of bail, ensuring they went directly to jail to face the law. Charles realized that his lover was only looking out for herself and had no intention of helping him avoid prison. This led him to decide to cooperate with the investigation and share information. His detailed account of the events that took place that night shocked many. Bellin admitted to being in a romantic relationship with Lisa, the homeowner, and her spouse, Na, but claimed it was motivated by financial gain and a desire to further his music career. He did not have genuine feelings for these women and instead often pursued younger, attractive women, openly engaging in numerous affairs. On October 5, 2020, Chuck met Marisella, a young student, at a nightclub. They spent the evening drinking and dancing together, and he eventually invited her back to his place. Marisella agreed, and when they arrived, Chuck's roommates, Na and Lisa, were already asleep. Chuck and Marisella went to his room, where they engaged in intimate activities and fell asleep. Later that night, Lisa woke up and entered Chuck's room, where she saw Marisella sleeping next to him. This triggered a jealous outburst, and Lisa went to the kitchen to grab a large knife. She then returned to Chuck's room and attacked Marisella, repeatedly striking her with the knife. Charles reported that he was woken up by a noise and was initially disoriented due to intoxication. When he turned on the light, he was met with a disturbing scene. Marisella's body had fallen to the floor beside the bed, where she had lost a significant amount of blood. Na entered the room, and both Charles and Na stood there for a few minutes, failing to provide any assistance to the victim. Once Charles regained his composure, he realized that he might be blamed for the crime due to his prior record, and that his influential acquaintances might avoid punishment. He claimed that this is why he agreed to help dispose of the body and conceal the crime. Charles stayed with friends for several days and, upon returning to collect his belongings, noticed that the blood stains on the floor and carpet had almost completely disappeared. Lisa informed him that she and Na had taken care of everything and destroyed the evidence of the crime. The three individuals involved decided it was best to leave town for a while and observe from a distance what would happen next. Lisa Dyke-Bell's defense team argued that she had no motive to harm she. According to her lawyer, Lisa's relationship with Chuck was purely professional, and she saw his music career as a valuable investment. She claimed that his personal relationships and interactions with others did not concern her. A key point made by her defense was that Lisa had recently gotten married to Moran and was happy in her relationship. However, it was unclear why she and her wife had decided to take the surname of their young lodger, Charles, after their wedding, despite claiming he was insignificant to them. During the trial, Lisa portrayed Charles as hot-tempered and cruel, especially when intoxicated, and stated that she feared him. Lisa's account of the events that night claims that Chuck brought a new woman home from the club, but their encounter turned violent when an argument broke out. Chuck allegedly grabbed a knife in a fit of rage. Lisa and Nina intervened, trying to separate but it was too late. Marisella was already dead. Chuck then coerced Lisa and Nina into helping him dispose of the body and clean up the crime scene, threatening to harm them if they didn't comply. However, a witness who testified in court, a friend of Lisa's, painted a different picture. According to the friend, Lisa was intensely fixated on Chuck and had often expressed a desire to get rid of any woman who got close to him. The friend suggested that Lisa's emotions got the better of her that night. The friend also mentioned a peculiar detail, a statue of Santa Muerte in Lisa's home, which was part of an improvised altar. Lisa had jokingly told her friend that she was into black magic and knew how to cast a spell to make a man loyal only to her. The ritual apparently did not work as planned, and she turned to using a knife instead. A real estate agent who was approached by the women shortly after the incident testified that they were desperate to sell several properties they owned as quickly as possible. They also wanted to put their home in Dallas up for sale, but were unable to do so while the investigation was ongoing because the house was a crime scene. The situation took a turn for the worse when the remains of she were found. At this point, Lisa and Nina were willing to sell the property at a significantly reduced price, just to get the money quickly. During the trial, the court considered Charles's full confession and his cooperation with the investigation. However, things took a turn for the worse for the fugitives after they attempted to flee to another continent. In March 2023, Lisa Dyke Beltran was convicted of a heinous crime against 23-year-old Marisella, as well as tampering with evidence and attempting to escape. She received a life sentence with no possibility of parole. Charles Beltran and Nina Morin, on the other hand, pleaded guilty and cooperated with the investigation. They were found guilty of concealing evidence. Nina received a 7-year prison sentence, but may be eligible for release in 3 years if she exhibits good behavior. Charles, who had prior convictions, was sentenced to 12 years in prison with the possibility of parole after serving 8 years. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Michelle Hadley. Michelle Hadley was born on December 20, 1986 in Upland, California. Michelle was the eldest daughter of her parents who were business owners. She grew up with a sister who's 3 years younger than her. Michelle was raised in a strict conservative home and shared a close relationship with her parents. Growing up, she had a pretty normal life. During her time at school and college, her friends knew her as a polite and kind person. Michelle was known for speaking her mind and addressing conflicts directly. Since childhood, she had been diligent in completing tasks, a trait that continued throughout her high school years. In high school, Michelle was in a long-term relationship with a single person whose identity remains unknown. The relationship led to marriage in 2008, but 4 years later, the marriage began to unravel. They decided to separate, which left Michelle heartbroken and questioning her ability to find love again. However, in 2013, she met Ian Diaz, a man she met through a dating site. Ian, who was working as a deputy U.S. Marshal at the time, was attentive and loving, drawing Michelle in. They eventually moved in together in the fall of 2014. Ian proposed to Michelle, and they set a wedding date. Initially, their marriage seemed perfect, but over time, Ian's behavior changed dramatically. Michelle had always seen Ian as a kind and attentive partner, but he slowly became loathing and abusive. At first, Michelle struggled to recognize these changes, mistaking them for acts of love. Ian began making requests that made Michelle uncomfortable, such as asking her to wear more revealing clothes. Despite her conservative upbringing, Michelle complied with his demands. Too easily, Ian made increasingly provocative demands. He asked her to get her navel pierced and she finally agreed. Ian's requests became more bizarre and controlling. He asked Michelle to quit her job at a marketing firm, which she loved, and take a job at Disneyland, a place he had worked at before becoming a deputy U.S. Marshal. Ian claimed he wanted Michelle to be in a safer environment, but in reality, he wanted to keep a close eye on her every move, using his connections at Disneyland to monitor her activities. Michelle was initially taken aback by her husband's unusual request, but she wanted to make him happy, so she agreed to go along with it. However, as time passed, Michelle began to feel uneasy about the situation and realized she was changing into someone she wasn't. She thought about discussing her concerns with her husband, but when she tried to talk to him, he became defensive and abusive. Around this time, Michelle and her husband, Ian, decided to buy a condo together. They thought owning a place would strengthen their relationship. This was about 2 years after they met in 2015. After searching, they found a condo in downtown Anaheim that they loved, but it was a bit pricey at $470,000. Although it was a stretch for their budget, they wanted the condo. What Michelle didn't know at the time was that Ian had no intention of contributing to the mortgage payments. Michelle and Ian had been experiencing relationship problems, but things took a turn for the worse when they bought a condo together. Ian claimed he was having financial difficulties and couldn't contribute to the down payment, which was $144,000 in cash. Michelle paid the entire amount and also made the mortgage payments, despite both their names being on the deed. Their relationship continued to deteriorate, and one incident turned violent, with Ian raising his hand to Michelle, causing her slight injuries. She drafted an email to her sister about the abuse but never sent it. By the summer of 2015, Michelle decided to leave the condo and move in with her parents. However, she was still responsible for paying the mortgage, which Ian continued to neglect. This enraged Michelle, especially since she had left her high-paying job and was working at Disneyland for less pay. When Michelle tried to contact Ian about the missed mortgage payments, he ignored her emails, calls, and texts. This lack of response pushed Michelle to her limit, and she decided to confront Ian directly. Ian revealed that he had no intention of paying the mortgage on the condo he shared with Michelle. This admission enraged Michelle, who was already struggling with the situation. She sent Ian a strongly worded email, warning him that his behavior would have serious consequences. Ian responded by filing a restraining order against Michelle, but the police did not fully support his claim, as he was also at fault. When Michelle discovered Ian's restraining order request, she countered with evidence that he had never paid the mortgage on their jointly owned condo. They eventually agreed to hire property lawyers to resolve the issue. The court ultimately ruled in Michelle's favor, ordering Ian to pay the outstanding mortgage balance and imposing an additional penalty if he failed to comply. Ian was upset by the judgment but was forced to abide by the court's decision. The dispute took a year to resolve, and by 2016, Michelle and Ian had separated for good. Michelle was finally free from the toxic relationship, while Ian was left. He was still living in the condo and paying the mortgage, which had taken a significant toll on him. In an effort to move on, Ian started using dating apps again, which is how he met Angela Connell. Although little is known about Angela, it is known that she was born in 1985 in Phoenix, Arizona, attended a Catholic high school, and graduated from Arizona State University in 2006. Ian and Angela met in January 2016, and their connection was immediate. Within a month, Ian proposed, and Angela moved into his condo. Everything seemed perfect for they. By May 2016, Angela was pregnant with twins, and Ian was overjoyed. However, their happiness was short-lived. Angela received an anonymous email that read, "You're not the right person for Ian." The message shook Angela, and she couldn't help but think of her ex, Jason Rayburn, with whom she had a tumultuous relationship before meeting Ian. But there was one problem: Angela had cut off all contact with Jason after their breakup, so it seemed impossible for him to know about her new relationship with Ian. The email's origin and intentions remained a mystery. Ian and Angela were still living in the condo that Michelle had purchased. One day, Ian brought up the topic of the condo in a conversation with Angela, and she suddenly realized that Michelle might be the one who had sent her an anonymous email. Shortly after, Angela started receiving more emails from 6 different accounts, all with the same message but worded differently. Curious about the sender's identity, Angela replied to one of the emails and asked who was behind them. To her surprise, the response claimed to be from Michelle. Angela told Michelle to stop contacting her, but the emails continued. The next few emails Angela received made her feel threatened and worried for her safety. Fearing for her life, Angela decided to take action and filed a restraining order against Michelle on June 1, 2016. In her statement to the police, Angela explained that Michelle's emails had filled her with fear and anxiety. She was afraid to leave her home because of the threats and was worried that she might be attacked and killed if she stepped outside. The court took Angela's concerns seriously and immediately granted the restraining order against Michelle. In June 2016, Michelle appeared to have moved on from her past relationship. One evening, she met a friend and was returning home when she was met by a team of police officers in her driveway. Michelle was taken aback but cooperated with the officers and was taken in for questioning regarding the restraining order. During the interrogation, Michelle was questioned about her connection to Angela and the threatening emails sent from her email address. Michelle claimed she had never heard of Angela and was unaware of the emails. She also stated that she believed she was being set up, as she had recently received alerts from Google and Microsoft indicating that her email address had been compromised. Specifically, her email address had been shut down, and she had been notified that it was being used as a recovery email for multiple unknown email accounts. Michelle suspected that her ex-husband might be impersonating her and had reported her concerns to the Anaheim Police Department. However, the police officers did not take her claims seriously. Despite Michelle's denials, she was served with a restraining order. Unbeknownst to Michelle, this was only the beginning of a more complex situation. Shortly after, Angela started receiving emails responding to a Craigslist ad that she had not posted. The ad contained details soliciting a sexual coercion fantasy, which shocked Angela. She realized that someone must have created an account in her name, as the emails contained her exact personal details, including her phone number, condo address, and the breed of her dog. The only people who knew her condo's exact address were Ian and Michelle. Angela's fear resurfaced as she pondered the idea that the Craigslist ad might not have been Ian's doing. She became terrified, unwilling to leave her house, knowing that the perpetrator was aware of her address. The feeling of being constantly watched and not knowing who was responsible made her extremely uneasy. Days after the incident, on June 24, 2016, Angela was attacked. She was left with a bruised neck, ripped clothes, and a head injury from being slammed against the wall. Despite her condition, Angela managed to call 911. When the police asked if she recognized her attacker, Angela identified the person as Michelle. The police decided to take a stronger approach with Michelle and arrested her, as they believed a restraining order was not enough to prevent her from harming Angela. While in jail, Michelle managed to inform her parents about her arrest. Her parents, who were from a conservative background and were successful business owners, took immediate action to handle the situation. Michelle's bail was set at $10,000, which her parents were able to pay, securing her release. After Michelle's release, Angela began receiving harassing emails again. Although it seemed unlikely, the emails were actually sent from Michelle's personal email address. This raised questions about Michelle's involvement in the harassment. In another incident on July 13th, Angela contacted 911 after seeing a man standing outside her condo. When the police arrived, the stranger claimed to be responding to a sexually explicit Craigslist ad posted in Angela's name. The police investigated the origin of the ad and found that it led back to Michelle. This discovery raised more questions. Was Michelle lying to the police, or was someone else using her name to post the ad? The day after Michelle's second arrest on July 14th, the police set her bail at a staggering $1 million, an amount her parents couldn't afford to pay. Michelle strongly denied sending the threatening emails and creating the Craigslist ads, and her parents believed her, knowing she wasn't capable of such behavior. They decided to hire a lawyer, suspecting that whoever was behind the threats could continue to have Michelle arrested. During Michelle's second stint in jail, the threats and emails targeting Angela stopped again. 3 months passed, and it seemed like the situation had finally calmed down for Angela. Meanwhile, Michelle's parents were working tirelessly to uncover the identity of the person impersonating their daughter. To get to the bottom of the mystery, they needed to find out who had access to Michelle's records. After gathering data from her school, hospital, and other records, they discovered crucial evidence. It turned out that Michelle had been hospitalized in June, on the same day the first emails were sent. This revelation made it clear that Michelle couldn't have sent those emails herself. Michelle's parents were given new hope when they received information that led them to believe their daughter was innocent. Michelle's father took matters into his own hands and downloaded software to track the IP addresses of the threatening emails, which were encrypted and difficult to trace. On September 30, 2016, Ian appeared at the police station and presented the bail, securing Michelle's release. Michelle and her family were shocked and confused by Ian's actions, and they couldn't understand why he would bail her out after treating her poorly in the past. They wondered if Ian had suddenly developed a conscience or if there was more to the story. After Michelle's release, Ian revealed a shocking truth. He claimed that Angela had framed Michelle for sending the threatening emails. According to Ian, Angela had created proxy email addresses in Michelle's name and used them to send threatening emails to herself. This revelation raised more questions than answers, and Michelle and her family were left to wonder why Angela would do such a thing. Angela went so far as to post Craigslist ads pretending to be Michelle. These ads included personal details that only Ian and Angela would know. Further, Angela inflicted bruises on herself in June 2016, claiming someone had attacked her in her garage. However, Ian later found CCTV footage revealing the truth: Angela had self-inflicted the injuries. Ian discovered a history of Angela fabricating stories and making things up from the start of their relationship. Angela's deceit went so far as faking her pregnancy. She had even purchased a sonogram photo and positive pregnancy test. Ian investigated further to determine the root cause of Angela's obsessive and hurtful actions against Michelle. Angela became aware of Michelle after meeting Ian in 2015, where Michelle and Ian came up frequently. As a result, Angela developed curiosity and eventually resentment toward Michelle after looking into Michelle's personal background, including the affluent community from which she hailed. Angela's discovery led her to view Michelle as a lucrative target. Meanwhile, Ian, Michelle's husband, harbored a deep-seated resentment towards Michelle due to a past condo dispute. The incident had left Ian fuming, particularly because he was forced to pay the mortgage after Michelle's countersuit. Seeking revenge, Ian and Angela formed an alliance to bring Michelle down. Ian provided Angela with Michelle's email address, and they began secretly plotting to frame Michelle and have her arrested. To conceal their scheme, they created multiple email addresses to communicate with each other. Using virtual private networks, VPNs, they created 6 fake accounts in Michelle's name. Unbeknownst to Michelle, these accounts were the source of the Google alerts she had reported to the police, which were actually created by Angela. When Michelle obtained a restraining order, Angela was dissatisfied, as her goal was to completely eliminate Michelle. In response, Angela devised a more elaborate plan. She created a fake Craigslist profile using Michelle's identity and posted an ad inviting men to her home for a sexual coercion fantasy. However, the inconsistencies in their plan ultimately led Ian to confess, inadvertently framing his own wife in the process. He was seemingly oblivious to the extent Angela would go far once the truth was out. The police obtained a search warrant for all of Angela's devices, and what they found was astonishing. The investigation revealed that all of Ian's claims were true. They discovered 21 threatening emails, most of which were sent from Angela and Ian's condo. Further investigation into the origins of the emails supposedly sent to Angela revealed that some were sent from Arizona. It was discovered that Angela had traveled to Arizona to visit her father during that time. The investigation into Angela's background began after these shocking discoveries. It was then that investigators found out that this was not the first time Angela had committed such an act. In 2013, Angela had committed similar crimes while dating Jason Rayburn, a state trooper from California. During their relationship, Angela claimed to be an attorney and said she had been diagnosed with cervical cancer. However, as time passed, Jason became suspicious as Angela's claims did not add up. He started digging deeper and was shocked to discover that Angela had fabricated both her cancer diagnosis and her career. On January 6, 2019, nearly 3 years after the truth came to light, Angela was arrested and charged for her crimes. The Orange County District Attorney's Office worked to clear Michelle's name, and 3 days later, her record was officially cleared of the false charges of making a threat to life and assault. As a result of the ordeal, Michelle had to drop out of her MBA program and lost her job. However, now that her name has been cleared, she is rebuilding her life. She has since completed her MBA and found a job in field marketing for a cosmetics company. Michelle has also moved to New York to start fresh and be closer to her sister. In contrast, Angela pleaded guilty to 10 felonies, including false imprisonment and perjury, and was sentenced to 5 years in prison. Ian, who was involved with Angela, has since separated from her and sold their condo for $500,000. In 2021, Ian faced multiple charges for allegedly masterminding a plot to frame Michelle. In addition to receiving a 5-year prison sentence, he was charged with 1 count each of perjury, cyberstalking, and conspiracy to commit cyberstalking. This raises questions about the thoroughness of the initial investigation. If the investigators and police officers had scrutinized the situation more closely, perhaps the plot would not have progressed as far as it did. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Leanne Tiernan. Leanne Tiernan was born on September 27, 1984, to Michael Tiernan and Sharon Hawkhead in Bramley. Although her parents divorced shortly after her birth, Leanne remained close to her father. She and her older sister, Michelle, lived with their mother in Leeds, but their father continued to play an active role in their lives. Leanne was also very fond of her grandparents and would often accompany them to church on Sunday mornings. She had a sweet tooth and was affectionately nicknamed Chocolate Chip Niece by an uncle. Leanne was a student at West Leeds High School. She had been diligently studying for her GCSEs. A day out with her best friend, 15-year-old Sarah Whitehouse, was a fun holiday. They planned to go to Leeds for some early Christmas shopping. On Sunday, November 26, 2000, after going to church with her grandmother, Leanne returned home to prepare for an outing with Sarah. She wears a black and white ribbed turtleneck sweater, black pants, and black ankle boots over a blue jacket. She styled her hair in her favorite French style, kissed her mother, and set off to meet Sarah. Leanne and Sarah took a bus to downtown Leeds and spent the afternoon shopping. By late afternoon, they finished their work and boarded the bus back to Bramley. At about 4:50 p.m., they got out of the car and walked to Sarah's house and parted ways. Sarah watched Leanne walk towards Holly Gill, a public footpath that was a shortcut to her house. Even though the path was unlit and went through a wooded area, Leanne felt safe walking because it was still light out. It should have only taken Leanne 20 minutes to get home, but when Sarah called Leanne's house at 5:20 p.m. to chat, she was surprised to hear that Leanne hadn't come home yet. Sharon kept calling Leanne's mobile phone, but she did not answer. At 7 p.m., Sharon reported Leanne missing to the local police station. West Yorkshire Police, led by Detective Superintendent Chris Gregg, launched a large-scale search operation. The terrain is challenging, with more than 700 homes, vacant lots, woods, canals, drainage shafts, and wells to search. The police are determined to find Leanne and bring her home safely. They used helicopters, uniformed police, and search dogs to scour the area, going from house to house. To preserve any potential evidence, trash collection in the area has been suspended. A week later, despite their best efforts, there was still no sign of Leanne. Investigators reconstructed her final activities with the help of her sister Michelle and close friend Sarah. As the investigation unfolded, several witnesses came forward claiming to have seen a suspicious man walking his black and tan dog in the Howley-Gill area just an hour before Leanne got off the bus on her way home. The police created a composite sketch of the man, describing him as 5 feet 8 inches with a stocky build, round face, and possible scarring. He was seen wearing a black beanie, a long waterproof coat and dirty jeans. Police have released this information to the public. As the investigation stalled, the case began to go cold. However, the public continues to show support for Leanne's family, doing everything they can to make her story known. Dad of 3 from Leeds, Sean Clark, even offered a £10,000 reward for any information that could lead to Leanne's safe return. Additionally, Iceland Foods, a supermarket chain, printed Leanne's picture and details on their milk cartons nationwide. As the months passed, investigators searched more than 2,000 homes and outbuildings along Leanne's route home from the shopping district. The police still haven't found Leanne. Her loved ones always hoped that one day she would return home. But 9 months after her disappearance, on August 20, 2001, a man named Mark Bisson was walking his dog in Lindley Woods, a forest near North Yorkshire, when he stumbled upon a mysterious discovery. Initially, it appeared to be a pile of rubbish, but as he looked closer, he discovered a floral duvet wrapped in twine. When removing the rope, Bisson found a body wrapped in 9 large garbage bags. The police were called, and they carefully removed the blanket and bag to reveal the body of a fully clothed young girl. The body was found with its hands bound behind its back with 3 yellow cable ties, and a leather dog collar was tightly secured around its neck. Underneath the black garbage bag covering its head, investigators discovered the decomposing face of a young woman. Using fingerprints, they were able to identify the body as Leanne Tiernan. An autopsy later confirmed that Leanne had been strangled to death with a plastic cable tie. The investigation shifted from a missing persons case to a murder inquiry. Authorities believe the killer was likely a local resident. 2 key pieces of evidence support this theory. Leanne's body was found just 16 miles from where she was last seen, and the yellow cable used to bind her hands is commonly used by the British postal system, especially Royal Mail or Parcel Force. The green garbage bags used to wrap Leanne's body were identified as coming from Morrison's, a popular grocery store chain with 2 locations in the area. Investigators collected DNA samples from Leanne's family members, friends, and known sex offenders in the area, hoping to find a match. In addition, a thorough search of the bushland area where Leanne's body was buried was conducted. The investigation into Leanne's death was ongoing, but one thing puzzled detectives: her body was found in an area that had been thoroughly searched before, and it didn't show the usual signs of decomposition after 9 months. Her hair was still styled in the same ponytail with the same hair tie and clip she had when she went missing. The medical examiner's analysis of her cardiac tissue revealed that Leanne was killed on the day she was kidnapped, and her body was stored in a cold environment for months. The killer attempted to dispose of her body by leaving it in a common dump area, wrapped in a duvet, a few weeks before it was discovered. Although the killer tried to hide the body, he accidentally saved a significant amount of forensic evidence and DNA. However, when authorities analyzed the body, they were disappointed to find no DNA evidence of the killer. They then turned their attention to investigating the items found with Leanne's body, hoping to find clues that will help them catch the killer. The investigation found dog hair on Leanne's clothes, leading police to attempt to create a DNA profile of the dog in the hope of identifying the killer. The dog hair was sent to a Texas university that specializes in DNA profiling of purebred pets. Although the university was able to obtain a partial DNA profile, they were unable to match it to a specific dog, so analysis was stopped. A knitted scarf was found around Leanne's neck containing knotted human hair. The hair was submitted for DNA testing, and a DNA profile was successfully created from the small amount of DNA found inside the hair shaft. The police then turned their attention to the dog collar that had been used to wrap a black bin liner around Leanne's neck. The collar was found to have been manufactured by a company called Armitage Leather Products, based in Nottingham. Detectives hoped that if the killer had purchased the dog collar from them, they might be able to obtain his name or address. The police reached out to the manufacturer and requested sales records. After analyzing these documents, investigators contacted more than 220 wholesalers across the UK. Their 112th inquiry proved successful. They contacted a company called Pet Pajamas, based in Liverpool, which revealed that it had sold 3 of the distinctive dog collars in question. Pet Pajamas provided investigators with details of the 3 customers who had bought these items. The detectives started investigating the customers and soon identified a prime suspect, John Taylor from Bramley, near the area where Leanne was last seen. Taylor's name had previously come up during the investigation when Leanne's body was found. At the time, witnesses reported that Taylor was frequently seen in the woods with his dog. By the time investigators prepared to question Taylor, he had already stated that his dog had passed away before Leanne's murder, sparking suspicion that he may have deliberately killed his pet to conceal evidence. At first glance, John Taylor seemed like a regular person. He was a 45-year-old man working as a delivery driver for Parcel Force, a division of the Royal Mail. He had no serious criminal history except for one instance when he stole a suit as a 15-year-old. He was previously married, with the couple having 2 children, a son in 1981 and a daughter in 1983, before they got a divorce in 1996. He appeared to be living a solitary and unassuming life in a modest house on Cockshot Drive, Bramley, Leeds. Taylor's neighbors consider him a normal person, but he enjoys causing pain to animals. He would hunt and torture rabbits, stab foxes, and bludgeon pheasants to death. In 1982, Taylor started breeding dogs and ferrets at his home on Cockshot Drive, which led to a buildup of animal waste. The smell eventually became unbearable for his wife, Janet, who had always taken pride in their home. Janet could no longer tolerate the situation and filed for divorce. Taylor frequently traveled around the country, not for work but to meet women he had contacted online. He often uses the internet to find female friends online and often has sex with them. Investigators later tracked down some of these women through Taylor's phone records and interviewed them. While most described him as harmless, some admitted to having called the police to report him as a suspect after the discovery of Leanne's body. 2 women, in particular, described Taylor as someone who enjoyed violence during intimate encounters. He even told one woman that he had a desire to have sex with her daughter. A former girlfriend of Taylor's ended their relationship due to his fascination with bondage. She reported that Taylor would restrain her hands with cable ties and cover her face with scarves. When questioned by investigators, she described Taylor's method of restraint, which involved using a bundle of cable ties stored in his bedside drawer. He would bind her wrists with 2 cable ties and then connect them behind her back with a 3rd tie. This technique was eerily similar to the way Leanne's body was found, and the details had not been publicly disclosed. 10 months after Leanne's disappearance, Taylor was arrested and brought in for questioning. A warrant was issued for his DNA and a search of his property. The police immediately cordoned off his house on Cockshot Drive and conducted a thorough search of the premises. In the backyard, they discovered a hedge plant, a plum tree, and a poplar tree. Pollen from these plants was found on Leanne's hair, skin, and nasal tract, indicating that she had been at the location before her death. During the search, police excavated the garden and found the remains of various animals, including 28 ferrets buried in a mass grave and the skeletons of 4 dogs. One of the dogs, a tan and black terrier, had a crushed skull. It is possible that Taylor killed his dog to conceal his identity after learning that the police were looking for a suspect with a dog. Forensic tests revealed that the hairs found on Leanne's body matched those of the tan and black terrier. Investigators gathered crucial evidence linking Taylor to Leanne's murder inside the house. A closer examination of the floorboards revealed paint carpet fibers caught on nails, which matched the fibers found on Leanne's body. Additionally, a blood stain belonging to Leanne was discovered under the floorboards. The twine used to tie the bin liners around Leanne's body was identified as part of a unique batch produced by a manufacturer in Devon, specifically designed for making rabbit-catching nets. A matching batch was found in Taylor's home. Further investigation revealed a stash of yellow zip ties in Taylor's house, which were manufactured by an Italian company exclusively for the Royal Mail. As Taylor worked for Parcel Force, a division of Royal Mail, it was easy for him to obtain these ties. A nail in John's kitchen had the same type of garbage bag wrapped around it, adding to the evidence. 3 large freezers were also found on the property, although their significance was not immediately clear. Initially, Taylor denied knowing Leanne or being involved in her murder. However, when giving evidence, Taylor admitted to kidnapping Leanne but insisted her death was an accident. He claimed that Leanne died from a fall that hit her head. According to investigators, Leanne's death did not occur as a result of a fall, as claimed by Taylor. In reality, Taylor attacked Leanne from behind while she was walking alone on the unlit path of Holly Gill. There were no eyewitnesses, but a stifled scream was reported. Investigators concluded that Taylor then strangled Leanne and bound her hands with cable ties, resulting in her death. In 2002, John Taylor, 46, was found guilty of murdering and kidnapping Leanne. He received 2 life sentences and will be eligible for parole after 20 years. After his conviction, investigators discovered that Taylor had committed previous crimes. Once his DNA was added to the police database, they matched him to 2 old assault cases. One assault occurred on October 18, 1988. A 32-year-old woman was attacked while walking to pick up her kids from school on Holly Gill. Taylor was masked and carried a knife. Another attack happened on March 1, 1989, when Taylor entered a Bramley house through force, masked and with a knife. He dragged a 21-year-old mother into her bedroom and attacked her. He also stripped, blindfolded, and gagged her, while her 18-month-old daughter cried in the next room. The investigation into Leanne's murder showed a clear calculation in the disposal of her body. After her murder, Taylor kept her body in his kitchen freezer. In the years following Leanne's case, police conducted a nationwide review of similar cold cases. In 2018, the full extent of John Taylor's heinous crimes came to light when he confessed to a series of vile acts committed against 5 women between 1977 and 1996. One of these incidents involved holding a knife to the throat of a pregnant woman and forcing her to perform a degrading act. Another incident occurred in 1977, just before Christmas, when he assaulted a barmaid. Taylor pleaded guilty to these attacks and was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He is currently serving his sentence at Wakefield Prison, a maximum security facility notorious for housing infamous and violent offenders. Many questions remain about the extent of Taylor's crimes, including how many more murders and assaults he may have committed and how far back his crimes date. It is also unclear how he managed to evade capture for so long. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Sarah Johnson. In the quiet town of Bellevue, Idaho, a typical Tuesday morning on September 2, 2003, turned into a chaotic scene. At 6:20 a.m., residents were jolted by the sound of gunshots, followed by the wailing of sirens as sheriff's deputies from Blake County rushed to the Johnson residence. Inside the house, officers found a gruesome scene. Diane Johnson had been shot once in the head and was found in bed, while her husband Alan Johnson lay dead on the floor, having been shot once in the chest. A 16-year-old girl named Sarah was left shaken but unharmed after a traumatic event. As detectives investigated the scene, they discovered surprising secrets that ultimately led to a stunning discovery. But who had Sarah's parents, Diane and Alan, wronged, and what series of events led to their heartbreaking deaths? A frantic 911 call was made after a neighbor reported a horrific crime. The caller stated that a 16-year-old girl, Sarah Johnson, had arrived at her doorstep, frantically screaming that her parents had been shot. The caller reported hearing 2 gunshots. According to the neighbor, Kim, Sarah had run to her house in a state of panic, claiming that her parents, Diane and Alan Johnson, had been murdered. The police and emergency responders were immediately dispatched to the scene. Upon arrival, law enforcement officials entered the house and were met with a disturbing scene. They found Diane, 52, in bed with a fatal gunshot wound to her head. It appeared that she had been killed while she was asleep. The walls and ceiling near the headboard were splattered with blood, and a fragment of her skull was found on the floor. Alan's body was found on the floor beside Diane's side of the bed. He was wearing only a towel, and a large pool of blood had formed around him. Initially, police thought they had a clear-cut murder-suicide case. However, as they took a closer look at the crime scene, their theory quickly unraveled. At the scene, investigators noticed the sound of running water and followed the trail of blood to the adjacent bathroom. The shower was still on. Once they turned off the water, they observed blood splatter on the walls and a single bullet hole in the shower wall. The officers then expanded their search of the house for more evidence. In the bedroom where Diane's body was found, investigators discovered what they believed to be the murder weapon, a .264 caliber Winston rifle, on the floor. At the foot of the bed, 2 kitchen knives were also discovered. Another knife was found on the bed of the Johnson's son, Matt. The placement of these knives baffled investigators. The presence of the knives at the scene raised many questions. It was unclear why they were placed in such a deliberate manner and what significance they held. A further peculiarity was the lack of forced entry, which suggested that the killer may have been someone familiar with the family's habits. Specifically, the fact that the Johnsons rarely locked their doors, a detail known only to those close to them, seemed particularly relevant. Additionally, the house showed no signs of having been ransacked, which contradicted the possibility of a robbery gone wrong. Sarah told police she was asleep when she heard a gunshot. She immediately got up and ran to her parents' bedroom to call out for her mother. That's when she heard a second gunshot. Fearful for her safety, Sarah rushed to her neighbor's house for help. She didn't see the person who fired the shots. Her neighbor, Kim Richards, backed up Sarah's account and was the one who called 911. On the property was a separate guest house that belonged to a family friend, 45-year-old Mel Spiegel. As investigators entered the house, they discovered a crucial piece of evidence on the bed, the scope from the rifle found at the crime scene. However, Mel Spiegel was unexpectedly absent. His sudden disappearance raised suspicions, making him a person of interest for the investigators. Sergeant Walt Femling ordered the property sealed off and instructed officers to stop the waste disposal truck from collecting trash. A critical piece of evidence was nearly collected and taken away, but a deputy intervened just in time, stopping the truck just a house away. The theory was that Mel had a confrontation with Alan and Diane, which escalated into a violent argument, resulting in their deaths. As investigators explored this possibility, forensic teams searched the trash cans and found additional evidence. Inside a bundled-up pink bathrobe, they discovered a latex glove, a single brown leather glove matching the one found in the Johnsons' bedroom, and ammunition for a .25 caliber gun. The evidence was carefully tagged and sent for DNA testing. As investigators pieced together their own scenario, it became clear that the killer likely had prior knowledge of the Johnsons' unlocked doors and the trash collection schedule. It was possible that the killer disposed of the evidence in the trash before fleeing the scene after the double homicide. Mel was located in Boise, Idaho. He voluntarily met with investigators at the Boise police station. The investigators inquired about Mel's activities earlier that day, and Mel stated that he had spent the weekend with his family. He was planning to return to Bell in a week. To verify Mel's alibi, investigators contacted his family members, who confirmed that he was indeed with them. During the conversation, Mel discussed his relationship with Alan and Diane, explaining that he had rented the guest house from they for years. Mel described his relationship with they as close and very good. When questioned about the rifle used in the murders, Mel acknowledged that it was his, but claimed it had been stored in his closet before he left for Boise over the weekend. Investigators then inquired about potential enemies of they. Mel shared that Alan and Diane had been concerned about their daughter Sarah's relationship with 19-year-old Bruno Santos, who was allegedly living in the country without proper documentation and selling drugs. Mel specifically mentioned Bruno Santos as someone investigators should look into. Mel encouraged investigators to talk to other family members, leading them to reconstruct the Johnson family's history. Here's what they discovered. Alan and Diane Johnson's relationship began in the early 1980s. At the time, Diane was a single mother to a toddler son, Matt, from a previous relationship. They got married in 1983, and Alan adopted Matt as his own son. The family settled in a beautiful home in the quiet city of Bell, Idaho. In 1987, they welcomed a new addition, a daughter named Sarah Johnson, born on January 25. Their children, Matt and Sarah, were both doing well in their studies. Matt, who was 22 at the time, was a university student at the University of Idaho in Moscow. Sarah was not only excelling in her schoolwork, but was also an accomplished athlete on her school's volleyball team and received adoring attention from her father Alan. The investigators had been ruling out potential suspects and were about to reveal underlying family conflicts that had been escalating over the past few months. With Mel cleared as a suspect, the Johnson family was known to be happy and loving, but things changed when Sarah started dating Bruno Santos. Investigators interviewed the family members, including Matt, the son who had returned home from university, and Diane's sister and brother-in-law, Linda and Jim Fave. All of them described the family life as happy and normal until Sarah and Bruno became a couple. According to Matt, Linda, and Jim, Sarah's relationship with Bruno caused significant tension in the family, which escalated over the months leading up to the murder. Sarah resisted her parents' rules, particularly when they forbade her from seeing Bruno again. Despite this, she continued to defy them. Jim revealed to investigators that Bruno had a potential motive to murder Diane and Alan. A few days before the murders, Alan and Diane had discovered that Sarah had lied about sleeping over at a friend's house. In reality, she had spent the night with Bruno. Alan informed Jim about the situation and asked him to join them in confronting Bruno. Jim informed investigators that Alan was enraged and threatened to report Bruno to the police for assaulting underage Sarah. The three then left together. A charge of this severity could result in Bruno's deportation. After hearing Jim's account, investigators suspected that Bruno had a strong motive to harm the Johnsons. They decided it was time to speak with Bruno. Santos County Police were familiar with Bruno Santos, a high school dropout with a history of minor drug-related offenses. When questioned, Bruno became confrontational and arrogant, making it challenging for investigators to deal with him. During questioning, Bruno claimed he had recently proposed to Sarah, and she had accepted. It's thought that Bruno made this claim to demonstrate his love for Sarah and prove that he wouldn't have done anything to harm their relationship. When investigators inquired about his whereabouts on the morning of the murders, Bruno said he was sleeping on the couch at his residence. He suggested that officers contact his mother, who confirmed that she was also at home with him at the time. Despite this, his alibi was not considered particularly solid. When investigators questioned Bruno about the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson, Bruno expressed his hatred for Alan and Diane Johnson. Bruno was initially the prime suspect because of his obvious motive. He was angry with the Johnson family, especially Diane, Sarah's mother. By killing the Johnsons, Bruno hoped to be with Sarah. The investigation into Bruno's involvement in the Alan and Diane Johnson murders took a significant step forward when a search warrant was executed at his home. As a result, the clothing and shoes he wore on the day of the incident were seized for forensic testing. Additionally, Bruno's fingerprints were taken to compare with any prints found at the crime scene. A DNA sample was also collected from Bruno at the hospital, along with hair clippings and scrapings from his hands. Based on the evidence gathered, Bruno was identified as the primary suspect in the murders of Alan and Diane Johnson. Despite thorough investigation, forensic experts found no evidence linking Bruno to the crime scene. Neither Diane's nor Alan's blood was found on Bruno's clothes or shoes, and no DNA, hair, or fingerprints from the accused were detected near the bodies. Additionally, no physical evidence placed Bruno in their room. The gloves and bathrobe tested negative for any incriminating evidence. The crime scene yielded no DNA or fingerprints from Bruno, and no blood or DNA from the victims was found on his clothing. Bruno was eventually ruled out as a suspect in the case. As investigators took a closer look, their attention turned to someone else. They began to question Sarah's family and friends more thoroughly about her home life and personal relationships. This led to the discovery that Sarah had been prescribed antidepressants and that her relationship with her parents was strained. Her family members had initially dismissed her behavior as typical for a teenager, assuming she was going through a normal phase of rebellion and testing boundaries with her parents. Linda, Sarah's aunt, grew increasingly suspicious of her niece's behavior in the aftermath of her parents' deaths. She reported to investigators that Sarah was not exhibiting the typical signs of grieving and instead seemed more focused on returning to her normal routine with friends and school. Sarah showed little emotional response to the loss of her parents, which Linda found unusual and even alarming. Her reactions seemed remarkably detached and strange. This raised more questions, prompting investigators to speak with some of Sarah's friends to gather more insight into her behavior following the tragic events. It was clear to everyone that Sarah did not show enough concern about the deaths of Alan and Diane Johnson. In fact, she seemed more focused on her own appearance, particularly getting her nails painted. What struck investigators as unusual, however, was Sarah's reaction to Bruno's arrest. Instead of being angry, she appeared to be worried about him, which seemed odd given that he was suspected of killing her parents. This remark led investigators to consider Sarah as a potential suspect, the most worrying aspect being that Sarah could commit such a heinous crime. The Johnsons' home remained an active crime scene, with investigators now focusing on Sarah's room as a second key area of interest. A question had arisen about how the blood splatter had traveled such a distance. To address this, a gun expert was brought in to examine the splatter pattern more closely. After analyzing the trajectory from Alan and Diane's room to Sarah's, the expert determined that both bedroom doors were open at the time of the shooting. This conclusion was supported by the presence of blood deposits on the back edge of Sarah's door, where the hinges are located, suggesting that the door was open, allowing the projectile to enter her bedroom. This meant that both bedroom doors, as well as Sarah's door, were open, and there was a hallway in between. During the investigation, plumbers were called to the scene to address a clogged toilet in one of the bathrooms. The clog was found to be caused by a shower cap. As a result, investigators decided to question Linda, Matt, and Mel Spiegel about some of the evidence they had discovered. Both Matt and Linda identified a pink bathrobe as belonging to Sarah. Mel Spiegel confirmed that Sarah had a key to the guest house. He also revealed that Sarah was aware of the gun stored in the closet. However, investigators faced a challenge in linking Sarah to the evidence. Eyewitnesses reported that Sarah did not have any visible blood on her when she ran to a neighbor's house for help on the morning of the murders. Forensic experts used luminol to test Sarah's clothes for blood splatter, but found none. Despite this, investigators obtained a warrant to seize and test the clothes Sarah was wearing that morning. Meanwhile, investigators asked Sarah to return for another interview to determine if her account had changed since they last spoke. They had noticed small inconsistencies in her previous statements. When questioned again, investigators found that Sarah's story had altered significantly. Specifically, they identified at least 5 changes to her explanations. In some instances, she claimed to have been asleep and was awoken by the sound of a gunshot, but her story varied across different interviews. When questioned about the door to her parents' room, Sarah struggled to recall whether it was open or closed at the time of the shooting. Despite Sarah's inconsistencies, investigators maintained a calm demeanor during questioning to avoid raising her suspicions. They were already aware that both bedroom doors were open, which was the only explanation for the blood splatter on Sarah's bedroom wall. As part of the investigation to clear her name, Sarah was asked to provide a DNA sample, hair samples, and hand scrapings, all of which were sent to the lab for testing. The pajama top and bottom she was wearing on the morning of the murders were also sent to the lab for examination by forensic specialist Rod Engard. Under a high-powered microscope, Engard found no blood on the front of the robe. However, on the back of the garment, he discovered patterns of high-velocity blood splatter. These stains were extremely small, some even smaller than a pencil mark, and were layered on top of each other, indicating a high-energy impact. He discovered blue cotton fibers and green paint specks on the inside of the robe that matched the shirt Sarah wore that morning. However, the most incriminating evidence was yet to come. Lab results confirmed that Sarah's DNA was found on the inner lining of the latex glove, and gun residue was detected on both pairs of the brown leather gloves. The robe, leather gloves, and latex gloves were sent to a lab in Chicago, Kahn and Associates, for further analysis. The lab found gunshot residue on all 3 items. The blood on the gloves and robe belonged to both Alan and Diane. This evidence was sufficient for investigators to arrest and charge Sarah with the double homicide of Alan and Diane Johnson on October 29, 2003. Sarah Johnson was arrested for the murders of her parents, Alan and Diane Johnson, and was held without bail at the Blake County Jail awaiting trial. The shocking crime made headlines across the country, captivating the nation's attention and sparking a media frenzy. To build a case against Sarah, investigators and prosecutors had to create a convincing argument that demonstrated her motivation and capability to commit such a horrific crime. Sarah's parents disapproved of her relationship with Bruno from the start. As a result, Sarah began sneaking around behind their backs and acting out in typical teenage fashion. However, the turning point came just a few days before the murders. A heated argument with her parents drove Sarah to desperation. She had lied about staying with a friend, when in reality she was with Bruno. Her father's threats to have Bruno charged with assault and deported to Mexico pushed Sarah to the edge. Investigators and prosecutors believe that this was the moment Sarah hatched a plan to eliminate her parents and start a new life with Bruno. On the morning of the murders, she went to the guest house to retrieve the rifle, setting the events in motion. Sarah carefully prepared herself to commit the crime by putting on latex gloves, leather gloves, and a shower cap to prevent blood from getting on her hair and clothes. She then went to her parents' room, where she shot her mother, Diane, in the head while she was asleep. When her father, Alan, got out of the shower and opened the bathroom door, Sarah shot him in the chest. After killing her parents, Sarah attempted to make it look like an intruder had committed the crime by placing knives in the bedrooms. She then gathered up the evidence and threw it away in the trash, hoping that the waste disposal company would collect it before investigators could find it. However, she made a critical mistake by not considering the evidence that would be found in her own room. Additionally, the shower cap she had worn became lodged in a plumbing system, leaving behind a crucial piece of evidence. The evidence against Sarah Johnson was overwhelming, and her trial began in February 2005, 2 years after her parents' murders. At 18 years old, Sarah stood accused of killing her parents. Her defense team maintained that Sarah was innocent and that an intruder had committed the crime. However, the prosecution was well prepared to present their case. They introduced physical evidence found at the crime scene and testimonies from family and friends that raised suspicions about Sarah's behavior. On the morning of the murders, there were 3 people in the Johnson household: Alan, Diane, and Sarah. 2 of them did not survive. The one person who did come out alive was Sarah Johnson, who was now sitting in the courtroom. The most damaging testimony came from Bruno Santos, who not only sought to clear his own name in the murder trial but also provided the jury with insight into Sarah's state of mind before the murders. Bruno testified that he and Sarah had planned to get married and that she had described a future where they would live together in a beautiful house, happy with just each other. He also revealed that Sarah frequently expressed her hatred for her father and even talked about shooting him. After 5 weeks of testimony, evidence, and explanations of the crime scene, the jury delivered its verdict on March 16, 2005. Sarah, 18, was convicted of 2 counts of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison without parole at the Pocatello Women's Correctional Center in Idaho. Despite making multiple appeals to reduce her sentence, Sarah remains in custody as all her appeals have been denied. Following her sentencing, her family members have publicly expressed their feelings about Sarah and her actions. The murders of Alan and Diane have had a devastating impact on their family, with most members believing that Sarah is responsible and deserves her punishment. Sarah's brother, Matt, has stated that Sarah showed no remorse for killing their parents and believes that if given a second chance, she would try to avoid being caught again. At the sentencing hearing, Pat Dishman, Diane's mother, addressed Sarah directly. She told her granddaughter that despite everything, they still loved her. However, her actions had left a devastating impact on their entire family. "We've been absolutely destroyed by the loss of your Alan and Diane, and it was even harder to come to terms with the fact that it was you who did it." Alan's sister Lynn expressed her concerns about Sarah's character, stating that she is spoiled and violent, and capable of committing murder if released from prison. Lynn urged the judge to consider keeping Sarah incarcerated permanently. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you, the case of Susan Reinert. Susan Reinert, known to many as Sue, was born in 1943 in the town of Ridgeway, northwestern Pennsylvania. Her parents, William and Jane Gallagher, were a significant influence on her early life. Her father managed a newspaper, while her mother was a dedicated school teacher, which later shaped her path. As a child, Susan demonstrated a clear passion for learning and a natural love for literature, following in her mother's footsteps. She pursued higher education at Grove City College, where she met Kenneth Reinert, a young Air Force enlistee. Their chance encounter blossomed into a romance as they studied together. Susan's determination paid off as she earned her bachelor's degree. After achieving her initial goal, Susan pursued further education, earning a master's degree in English from Pennsylvania State University in 1966. She had married Kenneth in 1965, shortly after graduating from Grove City College, and they began a life filled with adventure as a military couple, moving to various duty stations across the country. Their military life took them to different parts of the country, including Sacramento, California, Rome, New York, and even Puerto Rico, before they eventually settled in the Philadelphia region. However, in 1971, Susan and Kenneth decided to separate, marking the end of their marriage. Despite the divorce, they parted ways amicably, without any legal disputes. As a single mother, Susan focused on creating a warm and loving home for her two children, Karen and Michael. She was a dedicated teacher and a beloved colleague and educator at Chestnut Walled Elementary School, known for her friendly and warm nature. Outside of her professional life, Susan was actively involved in Parents Without Partners, playing a crucial role in the Valley Forge chapter. After her mother's death, Susan found comfort in her connection with the organization Parents Without Partners. Despite facing challenges, she remained strong, relying on the organization for support. As she navigated her grief and a significant inheritance, her life became increasingly complex. However, she seemed to be managing well thanks to her strong ability to cope and a supportive network. On the evening of June 22, 1979, Susan and her two children spent what would be their last day together. Earlier that day, her son Michael had spent time with his father Kenneth, a personnel officer at Fidelity Bank. They had played in a father-son softball game, but left early when Susan arrived to pick Michael up around 8:30 p.m. Later that evening, Michael called his father to apologize for leaving the game early. Susan also called her former in-laws, Florence and John Reinhardt, with whom she remained close despite her divorce. With a full tank of gas, Susan was prepared for the drive to Allentown, Pennsylvania, about an hour north. She planned to attend a Parents Without Partners conference and use the trip as a weekend getaway with her children. Susan had planned a weekend getaway with her two children, Karen, 11 years old, and Michael, 10 years old. They were supposed to leave on Saturday morning to attend events, but on Friday evening, around 9 p.m., they unexpectedly departed. The children had been outside collecting hailstones from a summer storm, and shortly after, neighbors heard Susan's car start up and saw it leave the driveway. Susan had been having an affair with William Bradfield, a fellow teacher, which had put a strain on her marriage to Kenneth. Rumors had circulated that Susan and Bradfield might get married. On June 22, 1979, Susan visited her boyfriend before embarking on a trip with her children to Allentown, about 49 miles north. They had planned to spend the night in a motel, but instead of arriving at their destination, Susan and her children vanished. 2 days after Susan Reinert and her children vanished, the community cared for them deeply was overcome with concern and uncertainty. On June 25, 1979, their fears were realized when Susan's orange Plymouth hatchback was found in the Hostin Hotel parking lot in Harrisburg, 87 miles from Allentown and 97 miles from her home. Tragically, her body was discovered in the back of the vehicle. The details of her death were horrific. Susan's body was found nude, battered, and bound in chains, curled up in the wheel well of her car. Her hands were tied, and she had 2 black eyes. It appeared that she had been either beaten with chains or tied so tightly that the chains had caused severe bruising on her back. To make matters worse, she had been given a lethal dose of morphine. The disappearance of her 2 children remained a mystery, however, with no signs of their whereabouts. Police were left searching for answers, with the children seemingly vanished into thin air. The police searched for hours, hoping to find Susan's children with a babysitter, but none of her regular sitters, friends, or family members had seen them that weekend. As a result, the police began investigating to find answers. To gather leads, the police published pictures of the Reinert family in newspapers for weeks. This was before the internet and Amber Alerts existed, making it more challenging to disseminate information quickly. As the investigation continued, it was discovered that Susan Reinert had named William Bradfield, the man she believed she would marry, as the beneficiary of life insurance policies worth $730,000. This revelation raised suspicions that the children might have been killed to allow Bradfield to receive the substantial financial windfall. However, Bradfield had a solid alibi, as he was at the beach in Cape May, New Jersey, during the weekend when Susan was killed and her children disappeared. Several other teachers were with him and could vouch for his whereabouts. The police then shifted their focus to Upper Marin High School, where Susan worked. The school was facing several difficulties and challenges. The principal, J. C. Smith, had been involved in a scandal. He had been fired the previous year, being arrested at a local shopping center, where a search of his Ford Granada revealed loaded handguns, a hooded mask, and various tools associated with burglary. Additionally, a syringe filled with morphine was found in his trunk. Jay's life was already unraveling before his wife's cancer diagnosis. In 1977, his wife was diagnosed with an aggressive form of cancer, which she would eventually succumb to in August 1979. During her illness, she kept a diary, documenting her husband's increasingly bizarre behavior. Jay had begun engaging in consensual non-monogamous activities, including group sex and partner swapping, to which his wife strongly objected. This behavior seemed to be a precursor to even more alarming actions. Around the same time, their daughter, Stephanie, moved back in with her parents, bringing her husband Edward Hunsberger with her. The family was already dealing with the uncertainty of her mother's cancer battle, and tensions were running high among them. Edward Hunsberger and his wife Stephanie, Jay's daughter and son-in-law, struggled with heroin addiction and had trouble finding steady employment in the years leading up to their move. In an effort to escape their struggles with addiction, they moved back in with Jay family in early 1978. However, just a few months after the move, Stephanie and Edward mysteriously vanished. The last confirmed sighting of they was in February 1978, when they visited Edward's parents in North Wales, Pennsylvania. Before leaving, they mentioned that they would return to visit soon. However, after this point, all contact with them ceased. Edward failed to appear at a scheduled meeting with his probation officer later that month, prompting authorities to begin searching for him and Stephanie. When investigators reached out to Jay for information, he claimed that they had left for California to escape debts owed to local drug dealers. Despite his assertions, Jay was unable to provide any further details about their disappearance. Edward and Stephanie had been constantly on the move, traveling from place to place and never staying in one location for too long, making it easy for them to disappear without anyone noticing. Meanwhile, Jay was arrested for theft, and a search of his home uncovered some disturbing items. Authorities found firearms, marijuana, prescription pills, security guard uniforms and badges, as well as disturbing pornography. They also discovered nitric acid and stolen office equipment from a local school. Jay was linked to a string of recent armed robberies matching his description and attire. While awaiting sentencing for the theft charge, Jay's alibi witness, Bradfield, testified that they were on vacation during the time of the robberies. However, the jury did not find Bradfield's testimony credible. Jay had a notorious reputation at Upper Merion, earning him the nickname, the Prince of Darkness. This was especially relevant in the investigation of Susan's death, which was caused by strangulation or suffocation. The time frame for her death was broad, and when questioned about his whereabouts, Jay couldn't provide a clear answer. The autopsy found that Susan's body had an extremely high amount of morphine, roughly 10 times the amount needed to be fatal, which indicates that her overdose was likely a deliberate act. As the investigation into Susan's death continued, Jay was found guilty of a series of store robberies in the late 1970s. He was sentenced to 2 to 5 years in prison on June 25, 1979. However, even behind bars, Jay remained a key suspect in the investigation into Susan's death. The police began to dig deeper into his past, uncovering a disturbing discovery. Jay's daughter and son-in-law had gone missing in similar circumstances to Susan and her children. There were two main connections between Jay and the disappearances. Firstly, large quantities of morphine had been discovered in Jay's house a few months earlier. Secondly, a plastic comb with Jay's military unit was found in Susan's car. The disappearances of Jay's daughter and son-in-law shared striking similarities with the disappearance of Susan's children. The investigation revealed a shocking series of events that had a lasting impact on the public. However, the most shocking revelation was yet to come. In late July 1979, about a month after Susan's body was discovered near Harrisburg, investigators stumbled upon a potential motive for the crime. In her official documents, Susan referred to Bradfield as her future husband. As the police investigated further, they determined that Susan's death occurred between midnight on Saturday, June 23, 1979, and midnight on Sunday, June 24. Bradfield and his colleagues arrived in Cape Cod at 5 a.m. on Saturday and stayed until Monday afternoon, June 25. However, there was a gap in Bradfield's alibi, as his exact whereabouts during the time of Susan's disappearance were unclear. Investigations also revealed that Susan had withdrawn large sums of money from her accounts, totaling around $25,000. She had told bank employees that she planned to invest the money in high-yielding investments managed by Bradfield, whom she trusted as her future husband. Unbeknownst to Susan, Bradfield was leading a double life, dating multiple women, including a fellow English teacher, with whom he had a secret relationship spanning nearly a decade. Bradfield had promised Susan that he would handle her investments and assured her they would be profitable, providing a way for they to fund their upcoming wedding and move to England. However, investigators found fake stocks and bonds in Susan's home, which were actually forgeries created by Bradfield. He had sold these worthless securities to Susan, using fictional companies to make them appear legitimate. This discovery added a new dimension to the narrative, revealing a significant financial motive. Bradfield was required to testify in a lawsuit in March 1980 but initially refused to answer questions, referring them to his lawyers instead. His lawyers denied any wrongdoing but were open to negotiating a settlement to resolve the matter and distribute Susan's estate, which was worth approximately $7 million. In June 1980, Bradfield testified in a civil trial, downplaying his involvement in the case. He contradicted Susan's claims about their relationship, saying it was not as serious as she had told others. He denied plans to marry Susan later that year, despite her having shared these plans with multiple people. Bradfield also made an unsubstantiated claim that Susan had an affair with Jay Smith, the former principal of her high school, but this accusation was not supported by any evidence. Friends and family members remembered Susan being in a long-term relationship with Bradfield, with no indication of a relationship with Jay Smith, who was actually in prison at the time of the trial. Bradfield failed to explain why Susan had named him the beneficiary of her $1 million estate. Instead, he portrayed Susan as an irresponsible person who frequently got into trouble, and he blamed her for her problems, claiming he was only trying to help her deal with the consequences. As the investigation into the missing $25,000 continued, Susan's brother and ex-husband filed a second lawsuit in June 1980 to claim the $450,000 life insurance policy taken out on Susan's life just before her death. The goal was to use the funds to conduct a private investigation. However, the case took a surprising turn when Bradfield was arrested on February 20, 1981, and charged with 2 counts of theft and 1 count of conspiracy related to the $25,000. Wendy Ziegler, a former student of Bradfield's, was also charged as a co-conspirator in the case. Bradfield was released on bail on February 23, 1981, and was set to go on trial the following month. However, the trial was preempted when the original civil lawsuit was settled out of court. As a result of the settlement, $36,000 from Susan's estate was set aside to cover the costs of further investigations into the disappearance of the children and to contest certain provisions of Susan's will. Bradfield's 5-day trial ended on August 3, 1981, with a guilty verdict for theft. The prosecutor, Edward Weiss, requested that Bradfield's bond be increased from $25,000 to $75,000 due to concerns that the conviction would increase the risk of him fleeing, particularly in light of potential murder charges. Judge Robert A. Wright granted this request. On April 6, 1983, Pennsylvania state troopers arrested Bradfield and charged him with multiple crimes, including 3 counts of murder, conspiracy to commit murder, kidnapping, and obstructing the law. A grand jury found evidence that Bradfield was aware of the plot to kill Susan and her children and had likely participated in these crimes. Although J.C. Smith, a suspected accomplice, was not charged at that time, a confession from a fellow inmate, Proctor Knoll, implicated Bradfield. Knoll stated that while playing chess with Bradfield in prison, Bradfield revealed his involvement in the murders. Despite the lack of direct physical evidence linking Bradfield to the crimes, prosecutors felt they had a strong case against him. A previous conviction for theft also bolstered their confidence, as did a potential connection to a person who may have disposed of the victims' bodies, which further implicated Bradfield in the murders that occurred in the 1980s. J.C. Smith was forced to testify before a grand jury in 1984, despite invoking his Fifth Amendment right. The questioning was likely related to the disappearance of his daughter, Stephanie, and her husband, Edward Huntsberger. Around the same time, William Bradfield was also called to testify, but the details of his statements were not made public. In April 1985, J.C. Smith was asked to provide handwriting samples that may have been linked to documents written years earlier, possibly outlining a plan to murder Susan Reinert. This led to Jay's arrest on June 25, 1985, exactly 6 years after Susan's body was found. He was charged with 3 counts of first-degree murder and taken into custody. While Jay awaited trial, a book about the case was published by crime author Joseph Wambaugh in 1984, suggesting that Smith was the killer. The book was later adapted into a TV miniseries, drawing national attention to the case. Despite this, Jay maintained his innocence from prison, filing appeals and claiming that William Bradfield had framed him. In 1989, the court decided to re-examine Jay's case and discovered problems with the prosecution's handling of the case. This led to a new trial in 1990. Jay waived his right to a speedy trial to allow for a thorough investigation. By 1992, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court ruled in Jay's favor, overturning his murder conviction due to issues with the prosecution's conduct. For 20 years, the state did not pursue a new trial against J.C. Smith, allowing him to live the rest of his life without further prosecution. Meanwhile, William Bradfield continuously disregarded court orders and refused to pay the $25,000 he owed to the estate of Susan Reinert. This issue was finally resolved in a settlement in 1996. J.C. Smith went on to file lawsuits against the state and Joseph Wambaugh, claiming defamation and conspiracy. However, both suits were eventually dismissed. On January 16, 1998, William Bradfield, who had been in prison for over a decade, was found unresponsive in his cell and pronounced dead due to cardiac arrest. Kenneth Reinert, the ex-husband of Susan Reinert, passed away in June 2002 without ever knowing what happened to their 2 missing children. J.C. Smith, whose conviction was overturned in 1992, wrote books about the case and remarried in 2002. He died on May 12, 2009, leaving many questions about his involvement in the 1978 disappearance of his daughter and son-in-law, Stephanie and Edward Huntsberger, still unanswered. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Shad Thyrian. Shad Thyrian was born on September 7, 1997, in Green Bay, Wisconsin, to parents Tara Pinich and Michael Thyrian. His parents later separated, and his mother started dating a man named Steve. Shad Thyrian grew up in a loving family that included his parents, 2 sisters, Ava and Svea, a brother, Bo Smith, and his younger sibling, Thyrian. He was also surrounded by a large, close-knit family that included paternal and maternal grandparents, as well as many aunts, uncles, nieces, nephews, and cousins. Additionally, Jastine had many friends who were like a second family to him. As a child, Jastine attended Howard and SWO schools. However, he later decided to help out with the family business, working alongside his father and grandfather. Jastine was a lively and adventurous person who enjoyed activities such as camping, gaming, and spending quality time with loved ones. Jastine was a talented and artistic person who loved carving wood. He was also kind and compassionate, often putting others' interests before his own. His empathetic nature made him a loving family member. However, what happened to him is all the more tragic because of his good character. On the evening of February 23, 2022, Jastine told his family that he was going out to meet two friends. They planned to hang out for the night, and his parents bid him goodbye around 9:30 p.m. At the time, no one knew the danger he was about to face. Jastine's mother, Tara, had gone out for a while and returned a couple of hours later. She then went upstairs to sleep, unaware that her son had returned home with his friend Taylor and was in the basement. Several hours after midnight, Tara was awoken by the sound of the front door slamming shut as Taylor left. This startled her, and she came downstairs. Tara called out to her son, but when he didn't answer, she went down to the basement to look for him. As she entered the basement, she noticed a bucket with a rag covering it, and she removed the rag, revealing a horrific sight. Her son's severed head was inside the bucket. Panicked, she immediately called 911. "My son's head is in a bucket in my basement," she told the operator. When the operator asked her to confirm what she had seen, she replied, "I looked in a bucket and saw my son's head." When police officers arrived at her residence on Stony Brook Lane in Green Bay, Wisconsin, they secured the entire house before entering the basement. There, they were met with a gruesome scene that left them shocked. They knew they had to find the person responsible for the savage crime, as they posed a potential threat to society as a whole. During their investigation, detectives made a disturbing discovery in a bucket: Jastine's severed genitalia and head. They then analyzed Jastine's phone records and found that on the evening of February 23rd, he had agreed to meet his friends Taylor and Alexander. At around 9:30 p.m. Taylor picked up Jastine to hang out at her apartment. According to Jastine's mother, Tara, police questioned Taylor and Alexander at their homes. Taylor was living with her friend Scott Thomas at his house. At Taylor's residence, detectives found bloody footprints near her minivan leading up to her apartment. The investigators took Taylor to the station for additional questioning despite having already been charged with a horrific crime: beheading her ex-partner. A bizarre scene unfolded in the interrogation room as Taylor appeared unconcerned by the situation and instead focused on complaining about the room's cleanliness. As she sat, gazing at the camera, it became evident that she showed no signs of remorse or guilt over what she had done to Jastine. The detective got straight to the point and asked her how she knew Jastine. Taylor replied that he was her ex-boyfriend. She also admitted that she had met with Jastine on February 23rd in her apartment, where Scott was also present. Additionally, she confirmed that the minivan belonged to Scott. When questioned about the activities Jastine, and Alexander did that night, Taylor readily confessed that they had smoked weed together. She explained that she was giving Jastine a haircut while they smoked. However, after a while, Alexander decided to head home, citing the late hour. After Alexander left, Taylor and Jastine decided to go to Jastine's house, where he told her that his mother and her boyfriend would be coming home late. They went to Jastine's house, where they used ice and also injected trazodone, a medication Taylor had stolen from her friend Scott. This revelation suggested that Taylor struggled with substance abuse, adding another layer of complexity to the case. During the interrogation, the detective realized that Taylor was under the influence of drugs, but continued questioning her anyway. Taylor told Detective Graff that Shad's body was still in the basement. When the detective asked for more details about what happened to Shad, Taylor claimed she couldn't remember, saying she had blacked out after smoking and drinking for a while. During the interrogation, Taylor initially attempted to deceive the detectives but soon realized her tactics were ineffective. She eventually confessed to being intimate with Shad on the night in question, revealing that their encounter involved various props, including a choke collar. As the questioning continued, Taylor acknowledged that she took pleasure in strangling Shad, and that he also enjoyed it. This behavior exposed her sadistic and violent tendencies. When asked about her preferences, Taylor clarified that she enjoyed being the one doing the strangling, rather than being on the receiving end. She also admitted to having a history of engaging in this behavior. When questioned about the whereabouts of the remaining body parts, Taylor expressed regret for not bringing Shad's head with her. However, this regret was not driven by remorse for her actions, but rather frustration with her own mistake, which ultimately led the police to her. The detective was surprised by her straightforward answers, which detailed the dismemberment of Shad's body. Taylor explained that some body parts were in the van, while others were in the basement. What was more astonishing was her lack of remorse after committing such a heinous crime. The conversation then shifted to the whereabouts of the body parts and organs. Taylor explained that they were all in a black bag. The detective wondered if they would need to take the head to a separate location, to which Taylor replied that it would be difficult to dispose of all the organs. The detective suspected Taylor's behavior was indicative of a disturbed psyche or mental health condition, hindering her emotional response to the crime. Alternatively, she might have been under the influence of drugs, triggering her to act on intrusive thoughts. During the interrogation, Taylor giggled and laughed while providing details of the crime, displaying a disturbing nonchalance. She casually admitted to dismembering her ex-lover with kitchen knives and not disposing of the body parts due to laziness. Her lack of emotion and calm demeanor raised doubts about her mental health and whether she had planned the harm. Taylor denied any intention, but her response lacked remorse. Taylor described how she strangled Shad with chains, admitting that she enjoyed the process and didn't stop even when she'd struggled. This behavior showcases her cruel and sadistic nature. During the interrogation, Taylor shocked the detectives by revealing that Taylor continued to engage in sex with Shad's body after discovering he had passed away. Taylor made a disturbing statement, claiming that when she loved something or someone too much, Taylor felt an overwhelming urge to kill it and lost control. This suggests that Taylor was fully aware of her actions when she dismembered Shad, as the incident occurred immediately after they had been intimate. Taylor openly discussed her disturbing actions after killing Shad, revealing a shocking disregard for human life. Taylor admitted to playing with his body for 2 to 3 hours after his death, demonstrating necrophiliac tendencies. Taylor also expressed regret over not taking any drugs after the incident, knowing it would have calmed her down. During the dismemberment and cleanup process, she became frustrated, but later claimed to have enjoyed it. Taylor explained that she was in a state of panic after the incident and didn't know how to react. She considered calling the police or an ambulance but didn't. When questioned by Detective David about her decision, Taylor expressed regret over her actions. She acknowledged that she had thought about seeking help but was overwhelmed by her emotions. In a later interrogation, Taylor provided a detailed and graphic account of how she dismembered the victim's body. Taylor pulled him over, his head hanging off the bed, near the tub. After I cut his head off, Taylor moved the tub underneath. Taylor explains the sequence: I beheaded the body, blood spilled into a pail, and the head fell in. I poured the contents into a blue Tupperware, finished cutting the head, and placed it in a container. The internal organs are in the Tupperware were scattered around, some in separate plastic bags. I put the bagged organs in a backpack, leaving the blood in the blue tub. Taylor Shaw Business was born in Yvonne, Illinois in November 1997 to Maria and Arturo Coronado. When she was in 4th grade, her family relocated to Wisconsin. Later, she married Warren Shaw Business and had a son, Matto, with him. Despite this, she reconnected with an ex-boyfriend, Jastine, and engaged in a relationship with him. After the heinous crime was committed, the authorities recognized that Taylor had significant mental health issues that required attention. However, they also determined that at the time of the crime, she was fully aware of her actions, which included the admission of enjoying the process of dismembering Shad's body. Taylor also confessed to using sex toys on his deceased body and engaging in other forms of physical intimacy with him. Taylor's Shaw Business was arrested on February 23, 2022, for the murder and dismemberment of her ex-partner, Jastine. Her trial began on July 24, 2022. Due to the severity of the crime, the court needed to determine whether Taylor was sane at the time of the crime and if she understood that her actions were wrong. During the trial, Taylor's grandmother testified about Taylor's difficult childhood. She explained that Taylor's mother had passed away at a young age and her father had remarried. Taylor had also experienced the loss of her brother, Arturo Coronado Jr., in a motorcycle accident in 2021. Additionally, Taylor's husband, Warren Shaw Business, was already incarcerated for distributing methamphetamine and was also serving as Taylor's defender in court. The grandmother further revealed that Taylor's young son had been taken into custody by Child Protective Services just 24 hours after his birth. However, Taylor's grandmother and her husband were fighting to regain custody of their grandson, Matto. The grandmother attributed Taylor's turbulent upbringing to her struggles with depression and bipolar disorder. She emphasized that Taylor needed psychological help, but also deserved a second chance at life. Arturo Coronado, Taylor's 51-year-old father, was brought to the courtroom from prison, where he was serving time for assaulting a child. What was unsettling was Taylor's reaction to his presence. She couldn't stop smiling and giggling throughout his testimony. Despite her unusual behavior, her father provided a candid account of her upbringing. He acknowledged that Taylor had struggled in high school, which led him to send her to live with her grandparents in Texas, where she eventually graduated. He also revealed that Taylor had been admitted to a psychiatric center before the birth of her child, Matto, due to hallucinations and suicidal thoughts. According to her, Arturo Coronado, Taylor's life took a turn for the worse when she met her husband, who introduced her to drugs. When Alexander Gainan, a mutual friend of Taylor and Shad, took the stand to testify, Taylor continued to giggle and laugh throughout his statement. Alexander explained that he had known Taylor and Shad since their time at Bellevue Middle School, confirming that they had dated at the time. He also shared his account of the night of the murder, stating that he had been drinking with Taylor and others at her apartment, but left around 1 or 2 a.m. when it got late. Alexander added that he had attempted to contact Shad the following day, but received no response. At her next court appearance, Taylor was seen wearing a spit mask, typically used to prevent individuals from spitting on law enforcement or court staff. Valerie, Taylor's second cousin, and several distant relatives testified on her behalf, stating that while Taylor currently required psychological treatment, she deserved a second chance at life in the future. Kelly Tiernan criticized Taylor, saying her actions were cowardly and that her mental health issues shouldn't be a reason for parole. Assistant District Attorney Caleb Saunders concluded that Taylor's actions were not a result of her substance abuse or mental health issues, but rather a deliberate choice. He emphasized that her lack of remorse warrants the harsher sentence for such a heinous crime. Defense attorney Christopher Frolick argued Taylor deserves a second chance, despite committing a horrific crime. He called the murder an honest mistake, suggesting Taylor didn't intentionally commit the crime or take pleasure in it. Frolick claimed Taylor was intoxicated and not fully aware of her actions when speaking with detectives. When Taylor requested a possible extension of the trial, her outburst in court revealed that Taylor was not only struggling with substance abuse, but also had deeper issues that required immediate attention. The trial concluded on September 26, 2022, with Judge Thomas Walsh sentencing Taylor to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The case shocked the world due to the inhumane nature of the crime, in which Taylor dismembered her former lover, Michelle Hadley. What was even more disturbing was Taylor's apparent lack of remorse or guilt for the heinous crime she had committed.